Michael initially thought of just getting a few stripes of flesh and a piece of bone as samples. However, he changed his mind after seeing the dark elves bombarding him and Gaia with arrows. What surprised him more was he didn't detect anyone in his environmental scanning. The distance between the cemetery and the forest was at least 900 meters. Still, a dark elf managed to hit Gaia with deadly accuracy. Michael wanted to see that dark elf. It was no-brainer that the dark elf who fired the shot didn't go for the kill but rather had given Gaia a warning. Holding the shield around them, Gaia could see at least hundreds of arrows soaring toward her. She used every bit of arch energy in her body, strengthening the shield. Like droplets of water hitting the puddle and creating ripples, the arrows created countless ripples on the shield when they hit. Without wasting any more time, Michael broke the casket with his bare hand and pulled out the decayed body of the dark elf burning within. He put the halfly decayed body on his shoulder and jumped out of the grave he dug. "Let's go," Michael said as Gaia slowly stepped backward, preparing to fly away from the graveyard. However, just when they were about to fly, a golden arrow shattered the shield and sent Gaia flying into Michael. Michael quickly caught Gaia in one hand while holding the decayed body in the other. Gaia gritted her teeth, holding the bubbling anger within her. Every fiber in her body told her to go berserk on the dark elves, but she managed to control her anger so they could escape the place without revealing themselves. "Make a move if you want to meet your makers." Out of the blue, a chiming bell-like voice traveled in the wind and breezed through them. The voice made Michael look upwards to see a dark elf carrying a golden bow and arrow descending from the sky. The dark elf's glistening bow brightened his sharp features. He could be described as black-skinned and dark-haired in appearance. The most distinguishing feature was his brownish skin due to living under the shade of the forest. Like all elves, he too had pointed ears almost as long as the normal elves Michael met in Mazeroth. However, his facial features were visibly sharper than those of other elves. They had a more angry brow curve, which coupled with their sharp, carnivorous teeth, gave them a rather savage and predatory appearance. As the dark elf's feet touched the ground, several others landed around Michael out of nowhere as though they sprouted from the ground. They all raised their bows taking aim at Michael and Gaia. Although they weren't muscular as the human warriors, nonetheless, every single dark elf had at least one tattoo ranging from icons of a deity to runes with actual magical enchantments. Because symbolism and tattoos played an important role in dark elven culture, tattoos and piercings were highly abundant. For example, the dark elf who appeared in the sky had an eagle tattooed on his neck as well as an arrow pointing towards the sky on his forehead, right between his brows. "You have desecrated a sacred ground," the dark elf spoke in a cold murderous tone. Since Michael paid the system to mask his actual cultivation level, the dark elves thought he was only at the core formation stage. As a result, the dark elves felt superior and didn't bother to call for backup. The dark elf who threatened Michael and Gaia was the strongest, who stood at soul refining stage level 4. "Put him down," the dark elf said, looking at the decayed body hanging on Michael's shoulder like a piece of cloth. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience, no one has to get hurt. "Just lower your bows and let us go," Gaia calmly said, but the dark elves didn't even budge. Except, their stars intensified more. "Leave," Michael growled at the dark elf before them a few meters away. However, he didn't direct the word to him. In reality, he ordered Nightmare, not the dark elves. "You will pay for your crime at the first light," the dark life coldly said without reacting to Michael's words. But, unknown to Michael, today was an auspicious day in the dark elves' calendar. Thus, they were prohibited from taking life unless facing a calamity. Since both Michael and Gaia had no weapons and didn't pose a threat to them, the dark elves had no need to kill them. But it was only temporary. As soon as the first light appeared on the horizon, the dark elves would send an arrow through their heads, ending their lives. "I'll take the body and return it in a few days," Michael calmly said to the dark elf. To be honest, Michael didn't want to fight the dark elves because he had desecrated their holy ground. They had all the right to kill them. If someone had done the same to a place Michael held holy, he would have killed them in a blink of an eye. That was why Michael didn't raise his hand to kill the dark elves. Whoosh! Instead of speaking with words, the dark elf chose to talk with an arrow. The dark elf sent an arrow straight into the ground a few inches before Michael in a blink of an eye. "I'll take that as a no," Michael put the body down, cracking his neck. "Remember, I gave you a choice." Michael slowly took a step forward. "Stay put." "It won't take too long," Michael said to Gaia and turned his gaze back towards the dark elf. Michael completely ignored the other dark elves because they were all only at the core strengthening stage. Not that Michael underestimated the dark elves, but rather, he was simply too strong to be concerned. Except for the soul refining stage dark elf who seemed to possess superior archery skills, the others didn't pose any threat to Michael. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience considering the soul refining stage dark elf was the strongest, Michael targeted him. Seeing Michael readying for a battle, the dark elves tensed. Then, they slowly pulled back the bowstring as they were only inches away from releasing the arrows they knocked. Whoosh! Suddenly, Michael dashed at the leading dark elf as fast as a lightning bolt. His speed startled the dark elves. Still, they managed to release the arrows as Gaia quickly cast the shield spell around her. Since she only concentrated the arch energy around her, the shield formed around her was stronger than before, which covered an area several times larger. The dark elf leaped back, firing a golden arrow. But Michael simply caught the arrow in mid-air, startling the dark elf. It shouldn't have been possible for a measly core formation stage warrior. Despite his shock and the fact Michael caught the first arrow, the dark elf fired again. This time, the arrow soared towards Michael faster than the previous one, almost at the speed of a bullet. Yet, the result was the same. At that time, Michael had a golden arrow in each hand. Whoosh! 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 The dark elf rapidly fired arrow after arrow, and so did the others, only to see Michael using the arrows as steps to climb higher into the air. In a few blinks of an eye, Michael reached the dark elf leader using the arrows as steps in midair. Except for a few, the dark elves targeted Michael. Because Michael was too close to their leader, they were forced to move around to adjust their aims. Gaia saw Michael move as swiftly as a feather in the wind, evading the arrows and fighting the dark elf. Surprisingly, the dark elf was just good in hand-to-hand combat as he was in archery. Thus, the dark elf managed to block and dodge Michael's punches. The way the dark elf dodged and blocked his punches surprised Michael. Usually, an archer wouldn't be as proficient in close combat as the dark elf. The dark elf blocked Michael's punches with the bow and arrow. If Michael lost his concentration even for a second, the dark elf would break his mask and stab him in the chest with the arrow. Visit. For a better user experience, obviously, the dark elf was a good fighter, but Michael was better. The more he fought with the dark elf, the more he learned about the dark elf's fighting style. Hence, Michael was able to predict his moves before even he could make them. As a result, when the dark elf tried to block Michael's left hook, Michael quickly plunged his knee into the dark elf's gut. Arg! The dark elf groaned and missed to notice the fist coming towards him in pain. Bang! The dark elf surprised Michael again by grabbing Michael's fist. Michael did not expect the dark elf to recover so soon. Luckily, Michael still had the arrow in his hand. Without delaying, Michael pulled out his fist, stabbing the dark elf with the arrow in his other hand. He plunged the arrow's head straight into the dark elf's rib cage without cutting any of his major organs. Commander! The dark elf shouted, looking at Michael stabbing the dark elf again and again. The dark elf was lucky Michael didn't go for the kill. Instead, he rapidly stabbed the dark elf to make him bleed and weaker. Drop your bows, or I'll slit his throat right now. Michael moved behind the dark elf, who had blood leaking out of his side, and put the bloody arrow against the dark elf's throat. You should listen to him, Gaia coldly snarled at the dark elves. Then, seeing their commander's life in danger, the dark elves hesitated but eventually lowered their bows. You have become our enemy, the dark elf whispered, gritting his teeth. It won't take long to slit your throat and kill your friends. Know that I didn't want to kill you but save you. You will understand soon enough, Michael whispered into the dark elf's ear as the dark elves stared at him with eyes full of anger and murderous intent. If stairs could kill a person, Michael would have died several times by now. The latest _AP_SODIes are on _the website. Seeing the dark elves dropping their bows, Gaia snickered behind her mask. It wouldn't be an understatement to say that Gaia hated the dark elves. As a matter of fact, almost all the races hated the dark elves, even the elves. To put it bluntly, the dark elves were racist, arrogant, and the most intolerable race in the whole world. No matter what one would say about the dark elves, they were one united race. Each dark elf was loyal and devoted to the well-being of their race. A dark elf would literally for another dark elf no matter whether they were related or not. That was the reason they chose to lower their weapons when they saw Michael threatening the life of their commander. The dark elves would rather let Michael escape than endanger their commander's life. Michael noticed the concern in their eyes and their loyalty towards the dark elf in his hold. "If I don't do this, your entire city would be destroyed by the plague," Michael whispered into his ears again before turning his gaze toward Gaia. "Take the body." Gaia didn't need to be told twice as she quickly grabbed the decayed body and flew to his side. "Do not follow us. I will return the body to you in a few days," Michael said to the dark elves. "Meanwhile, don't drink water without purifying it," Michael whispered to the dark elf. He kinda liked the dark elf and wished he could make the dark elf his subordinate. To do that, the dark elf needed to be alive. That was the only reason Michael advised the dark elf so they wouldn't get sick. "What the hell are you talking about?" the dark elf growled. "The plague. I am the only one who could find a cure and stop the plague before it destroys your beloved R." The moment Michael uttered the last word, he pushed down the dark elf with enough force to send him crashing onto some of the dark elves beneath him. Without wasting a second, Michael tossed a flashbang onto the ground and shot into the sky with Gaia. "Get him!" the dark elf gritted his teeth, holding his rib cage. Despite the pain and blood, he ordered his underlings to catch Michael. However, by the time the dark elves reached the sky where they saw Michael disappear, Michael teleported to Eve's floating mountain. On the island, Eve and Nightmare waited outside the carriage for Michael and Gaia. "Where are they?" Eve strolled back and forth with the hammer tightly clenched. But suddenly, she saw Michael and Gaia appear beside Nightmare. "Did you get the body?" Eve asked before even she noticed the decayed body on Michael's shoulder. Instead of answering, Michael just glanced at the body. Visit. For a better user experience, Elia, set up my workbench here. I need a sharp knife, clean cloth, and a barrel of water, Michael instructed Gaia, removing the mask off of his face. System, scan the body and give me that formula, as you wish. He heard the system's voice in his head followed by an unearthly whistling sound. The system began to scan the system while Gaia was setting up a long oak table and the chair which made his workbench. On the other hand, Nightmare flew out to the waterfall to get fresh water as Michael asked. The only thing that remained was the clean cloth and Eve provided it from her space ring. By the time Gaia finished setting up the workbench, the system completed the scanning. Patent 0 identified. The system requires 200,000 badass points to create a formula for the plague. Take it. Michael didn't even think for a second before agreeing to the system. Compared to the gold coins he would make after finding the cure, the 200,000 badass points were nothing. The only downside was after paying the system, his badass points were almost depleted. At that moment, he only had 120,000 badass points. Because of the upcoming Aqua auction, he was unable to turn the gold coins into badass points. The system requires a tissue sample and bone marrow from the patient 0. The system asked Michael, place the body here, Michael said to Gaia. Gaia gently placed the decayed body on the table as Eve covered her nose to stop breathing the strong stench coming from the body. But unlike Eve, Michael showed no signs of disgust on his face. Instead, he just took the jade dagger from Gaia's hand and started carving the body around its chest. Eve saw Ghost cut a chunk of decayed grayish flesh from the body and then turn the body upside down. Wait a minute, suddenly, Gaia stepped closer to the body and moved her head closer to the bodice's neck. Eve and Michael looked closer at where Gaia was pointing and was surprised to see a bite mark. The bite mark had 2 deep holes an inch away from one another. It was too similar to a vampire bite. Do you think he was bitten by a vampire? Eve asked after several minutes of silence. It's possible, Michael frowned. Visit. For a better user experience, what possible? It's definitely a vampire bite. I had a feeling that this plague is somehow connected to the vampires. It makes sense. If you want to bring down the cultivators, you have to bring down our. If I am right, Thera was only a testing ground. If we don't do something, soon the plague would spread throughout the continent. Gaia's words put a deep frown on Eve's face. Our could win wars against armies, but no one was equipped to win against the plague. Even the most talented scholars and healers in Empress Court failed to find a cure for the plague until now. They made no progress. A single person could spread the plague and destroy a powerful kingdom without waging war. The mere thought of it shook Eve to the core. Then it's a good thing you have me. Michael drew a line along the spinal cord with the jade dagger before sending a needle into the spinal cord itself. Whoosh! As Michael was extracting the bone marrow, Nightmare landed beside them with the barrel in his hands. Here is your fresh water, put it here, Gaia instructed the Nightmare as Nightmare walked towards the bench and placed the barrel beside the table. That's gross, Nightmare rolled his eyes seeing the needle getting filled with a thick grayish liquid. How long will it take? Eve couldn't help but ask Michael. She had lost so many closest family members in the last couple of weeks and couldn't bear the thought of losing her father, mother, and sister. But she lacked the knowledge or ability to find a cure. Deep down she knew she didn't have a way to save her family. That was the reason she drowned herself in battle. Ghost was the last ray of hope she had. System, instead of answering Eve, Michael put the flesh and the needle into his system storage. Then, he summoned the system. Analyzing the samples, creating a formula, converting the formula into a potion recipe, Michael waited for the system to finish creating the formula patiently even though time was of the essence. Just give him some time, Gaia said to Eve, noticing Ghost's silence. Visit. For a better user experience for almost 10 minutes, only silence filled the lonely mountain and they heard nothing but the melody of the waterfall. Cure found, imparting the recipe into the host's brain. Finally, the system etched the recipe into Michael's brain in the form of a potion recipe. He was suddenly flooded with new knowledge about the plague and a potion to cure the plague. With his new potion, he could not cure the sick but also prevent anyone from getting infected in the future. But unfortunately, his knowledge about the plague also came bearing a piece of bad news. According to Jennifer's condition, she didn't have much longer to live. At most, she had 2 days with the constant supply of healing potion. Eve, when Michael finally turned his gaze towards Eve, her heart almost skipped a beat. She shivered, waiting for his next words. I have the cure, but we need to find the ingredients fast, since time was of the essence. Michael even tried to buy the ingredients from the system store, but the system required 600,000 badass points. Even if he took along, he wouldn't get 600,000 badass points. Hence, the only way to get the ingredients was to buy them somewhere. But hearing Michael's words, Eve's face brightened and at last, a relieved smile appeared on her face. Anything. Bunyip bone, Hydra hook, Dryad lock, Behemoth eye, Naga scale, Walperdinger antler, and Plague barberry. You don't have any of these back in the castle. We need to buy them somewhere and we need them fast. Your sister has only 2 days, Eve shuddered, hearing his last words. In a blink of an eye, her mind was flooded with the sweet memories she had with her little sister since they were little. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go to the Aqua Palace and buy these. I am pretty sure they have everything you need. Nightmare always tried to stay positive, but Gaia shook her head sighing. Aqua Palace is in Kingdom Sil Allery, not in Thera. We will go to Sil Allery. I don't give a damn about the lockdown. I will kill anyone who stands in my way, Eve said with a stern dominating voice despite her condition. However, Gaia knew that the lockdown wasn't the only obstacle they had. Visit. For a better user experience, it would take at least 2 days to reach Sil Allery. But I have a way and you might not like it. Gaia paused for a few moments before shocking Eve with her words. The Rot Guards have a portal to get to Sil Allery. How did you know that? Eve asked, surprised by Gaia's words. She grew up in Ysirius but never heard House Rotgard possessing a portal to reach Sil Allery. She wondered how the heck Elia knew this. I happen to travel a lot, Gaia simply shrugged. Although Eve could tell she was lying, she didn't poke into the matter deeply because she had no need to. But I don't think the Rotgards will welcome us with open arms. Even Nightmare couldn't stay positive after hearing Gaia's plan. He was optimistic but not naive. Eve, do you remember Elia asked how ruthless you would be to save your family? Eve nodded at Michael. I am asking you again. How far would you go to save your family? As far as I have to. Would you kill the Rotgards? Yes. I will wipe out them in a heartbeat. Michael did not even finish his question when Eve stomped the ground and roared. Good, Michael simply nodded before turning his gaze back at the body. He then cut another piece of flesh and a strand of gray hair from the head. Michael submerged the flesh, and the strand of hair into the barrel Nightmare brought. The three of them stared at Michael without any clues of what he was doing. Under their curious gazes, Michael washed the flesh and the hair. Eve, go give your sister the healing potion, Michael told Eve as she nodded and went inside the carriage. When she disappeared from their sight, Michael quickly willed the system to teleport to Eve's castle. After Michael vanished into thin air, Nightmare came to Gaia's side. Are you thinking what I am thinking? Nightmare asked. Yep. He is doing it. Gaia's face had a devilish grin, unlike Nightmare, who seemed a bit worried. A few minutes later, Michael appeared again before the oak table. With a flick of his wrist, he took out a bunch of ingredients from the system's storage. As Michael conjured his alchemy flames which burned with emerald green flames, Gaia and Nightmare approached him. Visit. For a better user experience, so you're weaponizing the plague? Asked Gaia, looking over Michael's shoulder. Do you see another way to infiltrate the House Rotgards and use their portal? Michael didn't look at Gaia but focused on refining the ingredients. I just want to make sure it wouldn't come back to bite us in the butt. It won't. When I finish modifying the plague, it will only affect the soul refiners and fusion stage cultivators, Michael explained while extracting the essence from the herbs. Initially, Michael thought of making the plague airborne and affecting all the cultivators. They hadn't taken the vaccine he was about to create. However, the modified strain of plague would be extremely unstable and prone to mutate. Moreover, Michael did not want to start a pandemic that he wouldn't be able to control. Since Michael had reached the fusion stage, he did not need to kill the weaker cultivators with the plague. Instead, Michael decided to modify the plague strain with the help of the system to only affect fusion and soul refining stage cultivators. This new modified strain wouldn't mutate and was easily fused with the fear toxin. That's good. How does it work anyways? Nightmare asked Michael. Once you breathe in the newly enhanced fear toxin, you will experience coughing, vomiting blood, and losing control over your celestial and arch energy. Boom, in a couple of minutes, you are nothing but a commoner. I assume you will modify our masks too? Asked Gaia. Since they hadn't taken the cure yet, the modified fear toxin was dangerous to them. Therefore, Michael had to buy 3 masks from the system and modify them. Luckily, it was a simple task for Michael as he was a 5-star inventor and possessed all the necessary parts. But first, Michael needed to finish modifying the plague. At that moment, black essence beads floated about the green flames. These beads radiated an ominous smoke as Michael slowly merged them together. After which, Michael sent the flesh and the strand of hair into the fire and burnt them. When the flesh and hair burnt in the fire, Gaia and Nightmare closed their mouth and nose with their hands. The strong scent was nauseating to the point Gaia felt like throwing up. Soon, a crimson-red smoke gradually emerged from the green flame and merged with the dark ball of essence above the flame. The two mixed together to form a mysterious smoking goo that swam in the air like a fish. Gaia and Nightmare sighed in relief, thinking he had finished, but Michael had only completed half the process. Go stall Eve, Michael told Nightmare as the dragon nodded, shrunk its size, and walked towards the carriage. Meanwhile, Michael rolled up his sleeves, revealing the dark bracelet around his right wrist. Remove it, Michael asked Gaia to remove the bracelet as he controlled the plague goo with his other hand. Instead, Gaia gently tapped the bracelet and lifted it from his wrist. Screech. The latest _AP_SODIs are on _the website. When Michael willed the APD to come off his wrist, the bracelet split in the middle, and the needles inside Michael's wrist retracted. After Gaia removed the APD, Michael moved the dark goo above the flame, but this time, the fire turned from jade green to black. The heat produced by the dark flames immediately vaporized the black goo as Michael surrounded the vapor with his archenergy and pulled it into a large vial. As soon as the dark vapor entered the vial, Michael closed it with the cork. Now, I have to mix it with the fear toxin. Michael took out another vial with a gray liquid inside. With utmost caution, Michael pulled out the liquid through a syringe and injected the liquid into the plague vial through the cork. To his surprise, when the vapor and liquid made contact, it sparks a purple flame. The flame burned brightly for a few moments until finally condensed into a dark dusty element. This will be our weapon for ultimate domination, Michael devilishly grinned, looking at the dark vial in his hand. So, have you given any thought to mixing the blood tonic into the cure? I thought you would never ask. Unfortunately, the cure won't work with the blood tonic mixed in. It's only a setback though. I will find a better cure in the future which could be mixed with the blood tonic. Michael really tried to squeeze the blood tonic into the cure, but the formula simply didn't allow it. The cure had to be in its purest form. Otherwise, it wouldn't heal the infected and prevent one from getting infected. We would have been gods if it worked, Gaia sighed. Yeah, Michael opened the compartment connected to the needles in APD and put the one in his hand inside. You can't use the fear toxin while you are in your ghost persona. Gaia was indeed right. If Eve noticed the effects of the fear toxin and saw the Dark Lord using it by any chance, she could make the connection between Ghost and the Dark Lord. Hence, Michael quickly brewed another modified plague and enclosed it in vials without mixing with the FAR toxin. He made several vials and handed over a few of them to Gaia before taking out the 3 black masks from the system's storage. They were in no shape or form but plain black respirator masks. A few minutes later, Nightmare walked out of the carriage with Eve. He couldn't stall Eve any longer. But fortunately, Michael finished everything, including modifying the masks to filter the plague. Gaia noticed a healing potion in Eve's hand. Before speaking a word, Eve opened up the vial and emptied the potion into her mouth. I am ready, Eve said after emptying the vial. You have a plan to wipe them out? I have to tell you, they have 4 fusion stage protectors. The latest _AP_SODIs are on the website. The more, the better, Michael grinned, thinking about the experience points he would get by killing fusion stage cultivators. Now that Michael had given it a thought, it would be his first time killing a fusion stage cultivator. He wondered how many experience and badass points as a reward. With the modified plague in his hand, Michael didn't even fear the fusion stage cultivators. Finally, after so long, he felt like he was in control of every part of the game. Follow my lead, and House Rotgard will cease to exist when the sunrise. Michael put on the mask as his voice changed to something beastly. Gaia put on the mask and threw the other one at Eve. Nightmare, stay here and make sure nothing happens to them, don't worry about them. I got this, Nightmare said with absolute confidence. Soon, he grew to his full size, casting a shadow upon the trio, making them look puny in front of Nightmare. Let's go. With a nod, Michael shot out towards the sky and disappeared into the night sky, leaving Nightmare behind. Michael let Gaia take the lead as he flew closer to Eve in case she lost the connection with the archenergy again. Michael was not completely optimistic about bringing Eve with him, but knowing her, there was no way she would back down and let them go alone. If everything went according to Michael's plan, Eve wouldn't have to raise a finger against the Rotguards. Hey Eve, how much do you think I can make by selling the cure? Eve was surprised by his sudden question. Millions. Eve's heart was heavy. Although she knew Ghost wouldn't take coins from them for the cure, she hated to be a freeloader. No matter what, Eve wanted to repay for everything he did somehow. Hey Eve, if you're worried about getting the cure for free, don't. I'm not giving it to you for free. I want Voldegards to be my allies and help set up my majestic empire in R. Anything for you, my friend. Eve placed his hand on his shoulder and revealed an alluring smile that hid the immense sorrow in her heart. And thank you, the latest _AP_SODIes are on _the website. Hey, friends, don't say thanks. I am pretty sure you will get to save my ass once or twice in the future. Michael patted Eve on the back and continued their journey towards Yesrius to wipe out the rock guards. A few days ago, Ethan and Imelda followed Diana into her room in the Winston Manor. Diane, stop, Imelda called out to stop Diana, who strolled into her room, blasting the door open. After she entered, Ethan quickly closed the door behind her. Despite Imelda calling her repeatedly, Diana didn't even turn around but rushed into the room. After entering the room, Diana walked straight to the book rack beside the black bed. Diane, please listen to us. Ethan slowly approached Diana as she pulled out a crimson-red book from the neatly stacked books on the rack. As soon as she pulled out the book, a golden light enveloped Diana before the orange curtains were replaced by dark curtains, turning the room dark. But the chandelier hanging down the ceiling lit the room as Imelda saw the books rack slowly moving aside. Imelda was startled to see the dark robes, black swords, and daggers on the wall behind the book rack. A cold chill ran down her spine, looking at the wall because it reminded her of the memories Imelda desperately tried to forget. Diane, just stop and think about this. You cannot go up against the Guardians. Ethan tried to stop Diana. But no matter how many times Ethan called her, Diana simply didn't bother to listen to him. Instead, she waved her hand as her golden robes turned dark. The next moment, the dark robes on the wall slowly floated to Diana. You still have them. Imelda stuttered while Diana put on the robes and the dark black long coat over the robes. She was about to take the two black swords when Ethan placed his hand on Diana's shoulder. Listen to us, Diane. Please, I am done listening. Ethan had never heard a colder voice than Diana's. But, to be honest, it frightened him. But still, Ethan didn't back down as he turned her around using his strength because, despite her look, she was a hell of a lot stronger than him. When she finally turned around, her cold gaze swept across Ethan, pushing him a few meters away from her. Diana, what's all this? I thought you put that life behind you, Imelda stuttered. Visit. For a better user experience, Diana, I know how you feel. I am furious too. But we cannot let our anger blind our judgment. We cannot go against the Guardians. If the Sky Hall knew you're back into cultivation, they would imprison you. In the worst case, they would. Ethan couldn't finish his sentence saying they would kill her. They caged our daughter. They tortured her. Diana clenched her fist, speaking each word with dead coldness. Everything was orchestrated by the Guardians so they could get something they wanted. It's the vampires who kidnapped Sabi. Imelda swallowed the fear in her heart to utter these words. They were just an arrow. The one who fired the arrow was the Guardians, Ethan growled. It was true that Ethan didn't want Diana to go against the Guardian. However, it didn't mean he wasn't furious. Only if Ethan had the power, would he have destroyed the Guardians by now. Since it wasn't the case, he had to stop Diana from making any decision they would all regret later. Get out of my way, Ethan. I am constantly failing to protect my children, and I am sick of it. Diana turned around and grabbed the two swords from the wall. Imelda shivered to see the black swords in Diana's hands. Unlike Ethan and Diana, only she knew what really happened 21 years ago in the forest. She knew what the Sky Hall was capable of. Granted, Imelda felt the same anger as Ethan and Diana after she heard what happened to Sabrina, but her fear of Sky Hall overshadowed her anger towards the vampires and the Guardian Guild. For the first time, Imelda felt grateful toward Ghost. If it wasn't for him, Sabrina would have died twice. Although Sabrina told everything that happened to her except the truth about Ghost being the Dark Lord, the three of them knew Ghost was the Dark Lord. You didn't fail them, Diana. I did. As a father, as a husband, I failed, Ethan sighed, swallowing the lump in his throat formed due to grief and helplessness. Both of you please, Imelda stepped forward, let's talk this through. Diana, you're not Harriet Hunt anymore. She died in R. Forget about Sky Hall. If the Hunt family knew you are alive, they would be at our doorstep the next moment. However, Diana didn't bother to pay attention to Imelda because anger consumed her mind and heart. Think about Noah and Rowena. If you go against the Guardians, our secret will be exposed. What do you think will happen next? Ethan asked Diana. You agreed when we told Sabrina not to say a word about anything to Rowena and Noah. Please Diana, stop, Imelda begged Diana. Just like she said, the three of them told Sabrina not to reveal anything that happened to her to Rowena or Noah. They believed if Sabrina told them, Noah would renounce the Guardians and start a battle against them, which would ultimately result in Rowena stepping in. If Rowena stepped in, the Skillhall Hall would investigate the matter, and as a result, Ghost's identity would be exposed. It could only lead to one thing, the destruction of the Winstons. To put it bluntly, Sabira was the first domino in the long chain of dominoes. The moment she revealed her story, the chain of events would consume everything into a big black hole of war. That was why Imelda and Ethan made her promise not to tell anyone about anything, especially Rowena and Noah. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience by making her promise. However, they destroyed Michael's plot to set Noah against the Guardians. You are missing the point. Finally, Diana's hair turned from striking golden to raven black. I am not going against the Guardians. I am going against the elf who orchestrated everything. As she said, Diana took a step forward, unleashing powerful energy that forced Ethan and Imelda a few steps back. Seeing Diana in black hair and dark robes, Imelda shivered from head to toe. Once upon a time, an entire continent feared her. Then, after 2 decades, what Imelda thought she buried returned alive to haunt her. Remember the words you said before leaving our Ethan. You made a promise to always stand by my side. Do not break that promise now. Step aside, Diana coldly said as Ethan saw a blue light flickering in her eyes. Diana, please. Boom. Ethan tried to change her mind, but he was sent crashing onto the wall behind by a strong gust of wind. I am sick of you two trying to change my mind. Diana roared before stomping the ground with enough force to shake the entire room. The wall crumbled, and cracks formed where Ethan hit before falling down. Afterward, Ethan couldn't get to his feet. Not because Ethan was hurt physically but because he was hurt mentally. This was the first time Diana had cast a spell on him in a long time. It was equal to her raising her hand against Ethan. Ethan. Imelda quickly rushed to Ethan to lift him up while Diana walked towards the window and opened them with a wave of her hand. Diana. Imelda shouted, but it was too late as Diana flew out the window. However, before her figure disappeared, Sabrina opened the door. Unfortunately for Diana, Sabrina saw her figure. For a few moments, Sabrina just stared at the open windows. Only then did she notice Ethan on the ground. Visit. For a better user experience, father. Sabrina dashed at Ethan and quickly helped him up. What happened? Was that mother? No. Imelda immediately shrieked, denying the truth. Ethan, on the other hand, just remained in silence. He was too shocked to focus on anything. Even after getting blasted by Diana, Ethan didn't feel any anger toward Diana. Instead, he blamed himself for being weak and powerless to help her. Noah had tried to make Ethan stronger by making him break through to the core strengthening stage. Ethan had been stuck in core formation level 10 for 7 years now. But no matter how many potions Noah gave him, he simply couldn't destroy the bottleneck. What Noah had no idea that Skyhall placed a curse on Ethan. He was to stay at the core formation level until he died. Ethan was Skyhall's backup plan to control Harriet. However, when Harriet fought the angels and the forbidden spell for 30 days, another group of elders tortured Ethan and placed several curses on his soul. The only difference between Diana and Ethan was that at least Imelda was there with Diana. Then where is she? What happened to father? Sabrina brushed away the dust off Ethan's robes and corrected his collar. Go to your room, Sabi. As soon as Sabrina began to question them, Imelda tried to push Sabrina out of the room, but Sabrina didn't even budge an inch. Imelda did not want to reveal the truth about Diana to Sabrina or to anyone. She would rather die than reveal Diana's secret. Stop treating me like a child, auntie. I want to know the truth. I told you everything, and I deserve to be treated with the same respect. Sabrina raised her voice, shocking both of them and snapping Ethan out of the shock. That was Mother, it was. Ethan took a deep breath and answered Sabrina. Ethan. Imelda quickly tried to stop Ethan, but he shook his head. He didn't want to hide Diana's identity from Sabrina. After all, Sabrina told them the truth, and Ethan wanted Sabrina to know the truth about her mother. The question in his mind was whether to let Noah and Rowena know the truth as well or not. She deserves to know, Imelda, Ethan said to Imelda and turned his gaze toward Sabrina. Your mother Diana is not always Diana. Her real name was Harriet Hunt. What? Sabrina's heart skipped a beat as she began to shiver. Visit. For a better user experience, Harriet Hunt. Sabrina's mind completely went back, recalling the stories she heard and lessons she learned from Holy Trident Academy. Harriet Hunt was a myth, a legend, a war goddess who walked among mortals. To hear Harriet Hunt was her mother and lived as Diana, Sabrina's mind couldn't process the shocking news. What have you done, Ethan? Tears gushed out of Imelda's eyes as she collapsed to the ground. You serious? A city previously buzzing with people now seemed deserted. The beautifully complex stress was empty, void of any people. It was a clear indication of how hard the plague hit Ysirius. Unfortunately, the rest of the kingdom Thera wasn't in a better condition either, as the plague had already infected 95% of the kingdom. Soon the entire kingdom would be placed under lockdown by order of the Empress. As they flew under the drizzling dark clouds, Michael, Eve, and Gaia reached Ysirius borders that separated Kingdom Thera from the ocean. The sea view castle of House Rotgard stood mightily sprawling with guards. Not a single place was left unguarded, and despite the massive size of the grayish castle, House Rotgard deployed enough guards to prevent anyone from entering the castle. The mighty castle was the most mediocre one Michael had ever seen. It was a square castle with one tower accompanied by 4 mini-square towers in each corner. Each of the towers had 4 archers looking in all directions. In addition to the archers, 2 groups of soldiers walked back and forth on top of each wall. It wouldn't be easier to avoid the archers, soldiers, trebuchets, giant crossbows, and magical arrays placed around the castle without getting detected. So, using the dark clouds as their cover, the trio scanned the castle for weak points. Yet as far as they could see from above, the walls contained no holes, the soldiers patrolled the walls and the compound with full vigilance, and the magical arrays protected the castle from an intruder entering the castle through the tallest tower. The only way to enter the castle seemed to be the main gate, which was flanked by 2 groups of soldiers led by one soul refining stage cultivator in magenta robes, symbolizing the high status among the rock guards. No one could get inside or outside without the soul refiner's knowledge. This is troublesome. Gaia used her senses to see the translucent shield covering the entire castle. Normally, people would place additional runes to keep the arrays hidden, but the rock guards didn't bother to. Hence, the 3 of them could see the arrays and runes engraved on the castle walls from above. For naked eyes, the castle looked no different than any building, but to Michael, the castle almost looked like a Christmas tree with decorations thanks to the glowing runes. We can go all out if you think you can take them out, Gaia said to Michael, or I can summon spectral wasps to carry the potions into the castle undetected. Gaia's second option drew Eve's attention. Eve was oblivious to the fact Michael had weaponized the plague and contained it in several vials as potions. The problem was, however, how to send the vials into the castle without exposing the drones, as Michael planned to send the drones carrying the plague vials. That's where Gaia came in. The spectral wasps were just a cover-up to hide the drones and spiders from Eve's eyes. What potions? You will see, Michael calmly said. Although Michael had told Eve about using the plague against her enemies, he still hadn't revealed he finished weaponizing the plague. So instead of explaining, Michael wanted Eve to witness the plague in action. Besides, Eve wouldn't complain about his methods after he helped her family to get back on its feet. The latest _AP_SODIES are on _the website. Spectral wasps. Gaia pretended to cast the SPLL by waving her hand and creating dim balls of light, just bright enough to hide the drones within. Hovering beside Gaia and Michael, Eve saw the several orbs of golden lights materializing in the air before them. Under her curious gaze, the balls slowly started to float towards the castle under cover of dark clouds. "You sure those won't get detected by the arrays?" Eve asked Gaia. "We will find out soon enough." Gaia didn't show any signs of concern or anxiety on her face because she was calm. Compared to everything Michael and her went through, wiping out a family seemed like a chilling vacation to her. The golden balls gradually lost their glow and disappeared from Eve's eyes. But her full focus was on the thin blue layer of light enveloping the castle. Unlike Eve, Michael could see the drones flying through the thin light layer without triggering the arrays. If it were before Elidor, the arrays would have detected the drones despite having been built with junk metal. Now all of Michael's drones and spiders had Elidor's special cloaking runes that prevented almost 98% of the arrays from detecting them. While piloting the drones via his mind, Michael carefully paid attention to the video feed transmitted by the drone camera to his mind. The drones may have fooled the arrays, but they were still visible to the naked eyes, especially the vials they were carrying atop them. So any archer or a soldier could still see them and shot them down from the air. Hence, Michael carefully piloted the drones to the center tower's highest point. No problem until now. Gaia felt the excitement coursing through her veins. If the drones got detected, which was highly unlikely, she could go rampage on the rock guards. Otherwise, she could walk through the main gate and kill the plague-stricken rock guards, which would be as easy as killing insects. Either way, the fate of the rot guards was sealed. She almost felt pity for the rot guards but didn't show her emotions to Eve. To be honest, it was quite common in R. Like any other continent, R wasn't an exception to the rule of killing or being killed. If you were not strong enough and you were in someone's way of getting more powerful, you were as good as dead in R. The Voltiguards put survival over helping others, which led them to be almost exterminated by the rot guards. However, Gaia admired how rot guards handled themselves. As soon as the plague hit Thera, rot guards closed their compound to anyone and ordered everyone to stay put except for a few groups. They completely cut out any ties from the outside, including drinking, eating, or having physical contact with others. Compared to Voltiguards, they certainly had better scholars who gave proper advice and safeguarded the rot guards. "You have a plan to start over?" Putting the Voltiguards back on their feet won't be easy. At the same time, Michael was busy piloting the drones into the castle undetected. Gaia started a conversation about the future of the Voltiguards. Visit. For a better user experience, I'd rather let my father take of it. He has been leading us for decades and it won't change anytime soon. I only wish we can cure him sooner. Eve was a great warrior, and Michael could vouch for that. However, her leadership qualities were still hidden. No matter how good of a friend Eve was to Michael, he wouldn't recommend handing over House Voltigard to Eve without knowing how good of a leader she was. Since Michael planned to make House Voltigard his ally, he wanted someone great to lead the house to a golden age. But Michael really doubted whether Eve's father was up to the task. Although the Voltigards didn't get weaker, they didn't get stronger either under his leadership. I know it's not a good time to talk about the future. But give some thought to it. The path ahead of you won't get easier. Gaia placed her hand on Eve's shoulder to console her. I will. Eve nodded as she knew Gaia was right and just looking after her. Sooner or later, Eve knew she had to deal with the future of House Voltigard. However, she just wanted to focus on curing them before paying attention to other matters. On the other hand, the drones entered the castle through the open windows in the tower. He could clearly see the brightly lit throne hall directly beneath the tower. At that moment, a man wearing crimson-red robes and a crown with a large rub on the front sat on a lavish throne decorated with gold and gems. The man on the throne was undoubtedly the Lord of House Rotgard, Ivan Rotgard. He stared at the four protectors of the house who were seated on their own thrones facing the Ivan and Igor on his one knee. There is no point in wasting resources on House Voltigard anymore, Uncle Ivan. Igor received cold death stares from the gray-haired protectors. Still, Igor tried to convince the House Lord to focus on capturing House Voldegard's business and stream of revenues rather than trying to kill all the Voldegards as the protectors suggested. For Igor, fighting Voldegards was nothing but a waste of resources. He would rather accumulate power, capture more revenue streams, and make allies than wage war against all their enemies. Only if your father was here to hear those words, a bald old man with a goatee snickered at Igor. My father fought the Voldegards all his life. What did he get in return? Death. Igor didn't stay silent but talked back with a cold tone. All the more reason to wipe the Voldegards off the world. You should have died like your father on the battlefield instead of running away from a young fusion stage warrior. Another elder heir quoted the words young fusion stage to ridicule Igor. But unfortunately, no one believed Igor and his men. One couldn't blame the elders either because it was extremely rare to see a teenage fusion stage cultivator, as Igor told them. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience, what did you say? Igor raised his voice and was about to dash at the old man when Ivan roared. Silence. Ivan shouted echoed through the empty throne hall as his voice shook the hall like an earthquake. Every single person who has Voldegard in their name must die. After the echoes stopped, Ivan coldly declared. House Voldegard shall cease to exist before the first light. Protectors, Ivan turned his cold gaze towards the four elders flanking Igor. See to their destruction. No more excuses. What about their allies? An elder who ridiculed Igor asked Ivan with a murderous grin on his face. Ally of the Voldegards are our enemies. Destruction is what I would grant them, Uncle Ivan. Listen to me, too much power vacuum will open our city to new powers, powers we may not be able to handle. You dare to question your house lord? An elder slammed his throne and rose to attack Igor, but a single glance from Ivan stopped the elder from doing so. You are not the house lord, Igor. The only reason I tolerate you is you're my nephew. But my tolerance has its limits. Despite being blood relatives, Ivan shared no love for Igor, and it was a known truth to everyone in House Rotgard. As a matter of fact, Igor hated Ivan for leading House Rotgard on a war path, while Ivan hated Igor for being his nephew. Every time Ivan looked at Igor, Igor reminded him of his elder brother, whom Ivan hated to the core. The latest _AP_SODIes are on the website. Only if his ancestor hated Igor as much as he did, he could have killed Igor long ago while Igor was studying in Sil Allery. Michael witnessed everything happening in the throne hall through the drone. Igor surprised Michael with his words. Unlike the old cahoots, Igor actually wanted to strengthen House Rotgard through other means than waging war against the other houses. I have a limit too, Lord. When Ivan was about to rise from the throne, Igor said, gritting his teeth. A limit for my patience, how dare you? One of the elders growled at Igor only to be ignored by the latter. I wish I have taken the Empress' offer to join her clan, Igor snickered as Ivan's eyes reddened in pure hatred for Igor. While they were busy quarreling, they didn't notice the change in the air. Unknowing to them, they were breathing the fear toxin mixed with the plague. Michael felt lucky to get all the protectors and the House Lord under the same roof. It made poisoning them with the fear toxin a much easier task. Otherwise, he would have had to find each fusion stage cultivator and poison them individually. His only regret was Igor. Michael couldn't help feeling Igor would have made a fine asset in his growing army. Unlike most people in the world, the young man seemed to possess intelligence and rational thinking. It was a pity Igor was getting infected as they spoke. The only reason you stand before me is our ancestor care for Iranian, Ivan spoke coldly. Iranian was Igor's late father, and when Igor heard his name from Ivan's mouth, Igor felt his anger bubbling deep within him. Because of their old ways and hatred for Voldegards, Igor lost all his family. Deep down, Igor hated Ivan and the protectors more than he hated the Voldegards. I hope our ancestor will be delighted to see House Rotgard faces several new threats in a few years. But, suppose you think destroying Voldegards would make your lives easier. In that case, you guys are in for a shitty surprise, Igor sneered and stood up before Ivan. He was about to turn around and leave when Igor sensed the change in his body as well as in the air. Suddenly, an elder stumbled down from his chair. "Protector Cyan," another elder shouted and reached out for the fallen comrade only to stumble down like the other. Soon, the 4 protectors fell to the ground, vomiting blood. "What the fuck is happening to me?" Igor was not in a better condition as his legs gave up. As a result, Igor collapsed down. His vision turned blurry. Nonetheless, Igor rubbed his eyes, hoping it would clear his vision. While Igor tried to regain his strength, he heard the elders finally stop throwing up blood. A few seconds later, the protectors returned to their feet. With his blurry vision, Igor looked up to see Ivan rising from his throne and wiping the blood coming off his mouth. Visit. For a better user experience, since Ivan was stronger than everyone in the hall, the fear toxin affected him less. Are we infected? No shit, Igor coughed, closing his mouth. When he took his hand off his mouth, he saw the blood sprinkles on his palm. "You must have gotten from the Voldegards. It's you. You sealed us our fate. You fool. You doomed us all." The protectors immediately blamed Igor and yelled at him. "We must contact our ancestor before we succumb to the plague." Ivan, however, remained calm, unlike the rest. Roar. Suddenly an ear-piercing shriek echoed through the hall. "Intruder." Another loud shout followed the shriek, sending shivers down their spines. "We are under attack." Igor could hear someone shouting outside. As soon as they heard the alarm, soldiers of House Rotgard rushed into the hall, including the 2 soul-refining stage guards who guarded the main gate. "No, you idiots, get out of here!" Igor shouted at the soldiers who rushed into the hall to protect their lords. However, they were startled to hear Igor's orders. "We all be infected if we stay together like this." Igor was right, but as usual, no one listened to him. So instead, they surrounded Ivan and the protectors. "Raise the gates. No one is getting in or outside. I want the intruder's head on the plate before the first light." Ivan barked an order before turning around to leave the throne hall. Visit. For a better user experience, he was in quite a rush to meet his ancestor, who may be their best chance to survive the plague. "What's the rush?" Out of the blue, another calm voice resonated in the hall. The voice, however, didn't sound like a human but a beast. "What the? Who was that? Am I hearing things?" The soldiers looked around frantically, trying to locate the voice's source. Creak. 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 Igor's heart skipped a beat as he jerked his head around to look at the front door leading outside. The door shuddered, glowing for a second. Following the front door, the doors on the left and right sides also glowed and shuddered. Looking at the phenomenon on the doors, a curious soldier rushed towards the door. He tried to open the door, but no matter how hard he pushed, the door didn't budge. "It's locked." Igor sighed. "Someone locked us in the same hall. Now we are all stuck here to get infected by the plague." Igor just sat on the ground, rubbing his temples. "Is it true?" "My lords, what should we do?" a panic-stricken soldier questioned the protectors and Ivan. Every single soldier, including the soul refiners, felt weak and coughed up blood. In addition, some of the soldiers began to hallucinate and shouted in gibberish. "Break the door," one of the protectors barked as a group of soldiers limped towards the front door. "It's too late. We are done for." Those who heard Igor panicked more. Visit. For a better user experience, "Shut up, Igor." Ivan roared as he couldn't put up with Igor anymore. Ivan had enough in his mind, so he couldn't be patient with Igor as he used to. If House Rotgard's protectors and he got infected with the plague, it wouldn't be too long before the other families target them like vultures. Ironically, it's what they did to Voldegards. "You can kill me if you want." Igor let out a deep breath as more and more soldiers fainted due to the fear toxin in the air. "How does it feel, Lord Ivan?" The same beastly voice they heard before resonated again. This time, the voice was louder and sounded close to them. At last, 3 dark figures descended to the throne hall through the opening directly above the throne. The trio wore full dark robes with their faces covered with black masks. Something told Igor that the masks were designed to filter the air thanks to his study under the dwarven masters in Sil Allery. How does it feel to be weak and helpless? One of the three talked, but no one could point out whom. They couldn't differentiate them from the voice, which sounded animalistic rather than human. The closer they got to the ground, the further everyone stepped back. "Who are you?" Yvonne asked the trio, trying to conjure the celestial energy around him. However, he felt no connection with the energy around him. Unfortunately for them, the modified plague mixed with the fear toxin worked faster than the original plague. When someone was infected with the original plague, it would take 2 to 3 days to completely lose connection with the energies. But Michael's handiwork boosted the plague's effect and made anyone who breathed the fear toxin lose connection with the energies in a few minutes. You asked the wrong question, Yvonne. The right question is, how do you want to die? Michael asked Yvonne, tilting his head. My lord, when the protectors saw Michael place his hand on Yvonne's shoulders, they tried to rush towards him to protect him. However, as soon as they took a step forward, Gaia blasted away them with a powerful gust of force. Despite their weak status, the soldiers unsheathed their weapons to attack the intruders. Some even tried to cast spells. One who kills must be prepared to be killed. Michael grabbed Yvonne's neck, and before Yvonne could fight against his hold, Michael simply snapped his neck. Since Yvonne lost his connection with the celestial energy, his body became weak. Thus, Michael could simply snap his neck like a twig. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a fusion stage, level 10 cultivator. The reward is 750,000 experience points and 10,000 badass points, my lord. The soldiers and the protectors screamed, seeing Yvonne's lifeless body hitting the ground. His eyes were still wide open and contained a hinge of shock and horror. Igor, who hated Yvonne to the core, surprisingly felt relieved and had a tinge of joy seeing Yvonne's body. The protectors are mine to kill. After killing Yvonne, Michael quickly instructed Gaia and Eve. He wanted the experience points of killing the fusion stage protectors. The rest? Gaia questioned Michael with a devilish grin behind her mask. The latest _AP_SODIes are on the website. Accept him, kill everyone. Michael surprised himself by killing a mighty fusion stage cultivator like he was nothing. However, the killing came with a shock that he wasn't aware of yet. The protectors and soldiers looked pale and shivered after witnessing Yvonne's sudden death. Even Eve's heart shuddered seeing Ghost's power. She was glad Ghost was on her side. On the other hand, Gaia conjured a fireball and snapped her fingers, turning the ball of fire into a long arrow. Considering she was in her Elia persona, she could not use the powerful spells in her arsenal. Almost all her spells utilized her poison, which radiated an emerald green mist. Fortunately, the weakest spell, like the fire arrow, could kill the 6 soldiers. You should blow off some steam by killing them, Gaia advised Eve. Gaia's voice pulled Eve out of her shock. Ah yeah, Eve nodded. She felt no remorse or pity for the House Rotgard soldiers after she witnessed Rotgard massacring her family members. After killing Yvonne, Michael put the fear of God in everyone's hearts. Moreover, the fear toxin terrorized their brains by enhancing their fears several folds. In a blink of an eye, Michael appeared before a protector and grabbed him by his neck. The old man punched Michael's hand and kicked him in the gut, trying to escape his hold. Yet all of his attempts yielded no fruits. Finally, with a simple flick of his wrist, Michael took out the jade dagger he used to carve the elf's decayed body. Pulch. Michael plugged the dagger as deep as he could through the old man's rib cage. The blood splashed across Igor's face, snapping him out of shock. Still, Igor couldn't even take a step toward the black-masked monster who killed his uncle in a blink of an eye. Igor knew he should feel anger and fury, but surprisingly, he didn't feel anything. Instead, his hatred and disappointment towards the protectors and his uncle reached a point that Igor couldn't care less about them. However, Igor hated dying in the throne hall. He had so much to live for. Despite the obvious death, Igor sighed and decided to die like a man, then begged them for mercy. The elder who got stabbed was just at his arm's length, but Igor felt no urge to save him. Instead, Igor stared at the dark-robed figure stabbing the elder again and again and again until the elder's white robes turned red. It was not a kill but a statement. Seeing the brutality, the rest trembled in overwhelming fear, which caused some of them to lose consciousness and hallucinate. Michael dropped the dead protector down and stomped the head, crushing the skull under his feet. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a fusion stage, level 2 cultivator. The reward is 750,000 experience points and 10,000 badass points. Congratulations to the host for leveling up. The current level is the fusion stage level 2. The fear tightened Igor's muscles as his legs refused to move even though the killer was walking toward him. Shit, Igor panicked and tried to step back only to fail. Taking a few steps, the killer reached him. However, the killer walked past him instead of killing him as Igor expected. Boom. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience, on the other hand, Eve leaped into the air, and in the mid-air, she flicked her wrist as a golden spiked mace materialized in her hand. She brought down the mace upon the soul refining stage guard. The poor soul tried to cast a spell to leap away as his body and mind were trained to cast spells. But he forgot that he had lost his ability to cast spells. As a result, he didn't move an inch until Eve brought down the spiked mace on his head. The golden mace crushed his skull as bits and pieces scattered across the hall, and a few chunks ended up on some soldiers' faces. Some soldiers outright fainted on the spot and got stepped on by Michael on his way to the two protectors. Seeing Michael walking toward them, the two protectors lost their courage to fight. Instead, they turned their backs on Michael, running towards the door as fast as they could. Move! They shoved off the soldiers who remained in their path. Not in a million years would they have imagined running for their life. But, despite the overwhelming fear, Igor focused his gaze on the killer, trying to figure out his cultivation stage. Igor got confused as no matter how hard he focused, he couldn't see the cultivation stage of the killer. Arg! His focus on the killer got broken by the fire arrow that flew past his face and penetrated the soldiers who stood around him. The arrow didn't stop at killing a few but flew through the soldiers, ending their lives. In a few moments, the shiny marble floor was flooded with blood, and the throne hall became a tomb for many. The soldiers didn't stand a chance against Eve, let alone Michael and Gaia. While controlling the fire arrow and killing the soldiers, Gaia admired Eve's persistence. Regardless of the plague, Eve pushed herself to the limit and caused havoc among the soldiers like a killing machine. Suppose anyone in Eve's shoes had been bedridden. The plague turned the fusion stage cultivators into weaklings. Yet, it couldn't stop Eve, who was only a core strengthening stage warrior. Of course, Eve drank several vials of healing potions, but Gaia knew more than the healing potions. It was persistence and endurance that fueled her. Boom! 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 Eve swung the mace without any finesse or technique in all directions. The soldiers screamed and begged for mercy, but Eve was in a raging mood. She kept hitting the soldiers mercilessly as she vented all her rage and hatred upon the soldiers. Meanwhile, Michael caught the two fusion stage protectors who banged the door like crazy. At that moment, Gaia and Eve killed almost a third of the soldiers in the hall, including the two soul refining stage cultivators. Igor witnessed the brutal massacre and the fall of his house and stood still. He was weak and scared to do anything. Didn't you two want to wipe out the Voldegards a few moments ago? Michael whispered in their ears as their bodies went rigid. The protectors slowly turned around. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience for a few seconds, Michael just stared at them. Afterward, Michael just grabbed their heads and smashed them against the door the protectors tried so hard to open. Michael kept going until the two protectors lost their heads, and he received the notifications from the system. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a fusion stage, level 3 cultivator. The reward is 750,000 experience points and 10,000 badass points. congratulations to the host for leveling up. The current level is the Fusion Stage Level 3. Ding! Congratulations to the host for killing a Fusion Stage, Level 3 Cultivator. The reward is 750,000 experience points and 10,000 badass points. Congratulations to the host for leveling up. The current level is the Fusion Stage Level 4. After reaching Fusion Stage Level 4, Michael felt a warm wave soothing him from behind. The feeling made him smile and close his eyes. When he looked up with his eyes closed, the throne hall grew a bit darker for a moment, and the chandeliers flickered. Fortunately, the phenomenon disappeared before Eve could notice the change. Michael felt his power growing within him. Eve creased her brows seeing ghosts standing still without moving. No one dared to stay close to him. Please don't kill me. No. Have mercy. Lord Igor. Save us. The remaining soldiers went to their knees and began begging for mercy. Some even grabbed Igor's legs, pleading with him to save them. But unfortunately, Igor had no power or will to save them. Instead, Igor was stuck in a state of utter fear and shock. On the other hand, Michael remained with his eyes closed until the screams and cries died down, and the hall became deadly silent. At that moment, they only spared Igor's life but scarred him for life. It would take years for Igor to come out of the trauma caused by the three of them. Show us the portal to Sil Allery. Gaia grabbed Igor by his neck and asked. Despite her cold tone, Igor said no word. Instead, he looked like his mind was somewhere else. The latest _AP_SODIES are on the website. Hey! Gaia slapped Igor to bring him out of shock. Where is the portal to Sil Allery? Gaia asked again, shaking Igor by his collar. Portal, Sil Allery. Igor mumbled, leave him. I know where it is. Michael finally opened his mouth. He located the portal through the drones and spiders. So they had no need to threaten Igor. Michael spared Igor not because he wanted to know the portal's location but because he wanted Igor to consider joining Voldegards. It was apparent Igor hated the Protectors and the House Lord. Now that he had killed them, Michael wished to rope Igor into joining Voldegards. Michael turned around and slowly walked towards Igor. When he reached Igor, he just patted Igor on the face. House Rotgard is no more. Now you are finally free. Michael then placed his hand on Igor's blood-soaked chest. Boom! Suddenly a powerful gust of wind shot Igor away onto the wall behind. The force of Igor hitting the wall made him lose consciousness. After Igor collapsed on the ground, Michael looked around at the dead bodies in the hall. An eye for an eye, Michael stated, feeling no pity. Every soldier they killed had blood on their hands. A few days ago, they massacred the Voldegards. At that time, the soldiers of House Rotgard didn't show any mercy to Voldegards. So why should Michael show them any mercy? Michael only killed the strongest of the Rotgards and spared the rest so they could spread the word about what happened to them. Let's go. Michael walked away from the dead bodies and entered the corridor through the door the two Protectors tried to open. As soon as they opened the door, a few guards tried to attack them, but Gaia killed them before they could even raise their weapons. By the time they entered an empty room where House Rotgard had built the portal, the sun rose up on the horizon, shedding its first light on the kingdom. Just as Michael told Eve, the House Rotgard had ceased to exist at the first light. Finally, Eve stood before the portal after so much trouble and blood. Next stop, Sil Allery, Gaia stated before walking into the dark blue vortex. Following Gaia, Michael walked into the portal and disappeared. At last, Eve took a deep breath. Great 1 and 2, please let me save my family, Eve prayed, looking at the ceiling. Then, she walked into the portal with a ray of hope and heaviness in her heart. The latest _AP_SODIES are on the website. The kingdom of Sil Allery was one of the 3 kingdoms in Aur ruled by the elves. As one would expect from a kingdom ruled by elves, elves were the majority of the population, followed by half-elves, orcs, and a tiny number of humans. The kingdom itself was vast, almost double the size of Kingdom Thera, which was ruled by a human king. Bordered between rich forests to the north, a wide river to the south, a mountain to the east, and a huge lake to the west, Sil Alaris' main source of income was fishing, trading natural resources, and mining gold from many gold mines scattered across the kingdom. Many coveted the gold mines over the past decades. Still, none succeeded in taking the mines from the elven royal family of Sil Alari. In addition to the gold mines, many rare ore mines scattered across the kingdom, such as Stantine, Kronor, and Lagreen. Stantine was primarily used in building lightweight airships. For example, the airship of Tenulia Valran was built with Stantine as well as the Hunter Guardian armors. The metal had an affinity for runes like none other. Hence, placing runes on the metal was much easier than on other metals. Sil Alari had perfect tropical paradise weather, contributing to the kingdom's beauty. The kingdom was one of the prettiest kingdoms in the whole world, with elegance, small, hidden ponds, gorgeous flower fields, and small, playful waterfalls were just a sliver of the majesty Sil Alari has to offer. Normally, a kingdom like Sil Alari would be cherished by foreigners and tourists. However, Sil Alari had the lowest tourist visit because of the elves' cold nature towards foreigners. The Alarians felt foreigners would hurt their kingdom's prestige and attractiveness. As a result, Sil Alari had unbending laws and law enforcement. Any crime committed inside the border by whether an Alarian or a foreigner, mostly they would be thrown into a mountain prison or killed on the spot by beheading. Sil Alari's crime rate was almost 1% due to its strict laws and punishments. This was also reflected in the kingdom's flag, which had 3 vertical stripes and a circle in dark pink and bronze. Their coat of arms was animal teeth on a hexagon, symbolizing their ruthlessness. Sil Alari had 3 cities, each ruled by an elven duke. Michael's destination, the Aqua Palace, was built in the city of Alan Alari, named after an ancestor of King Leikler Alari. Alan Alari was a military city with barracks and a military shipyard. The entire city was surrounded by thick walls. The ruler of Alan Alari, Duke Aelas Alari, King Leikler Alari's cousin, resided in the most fortified forts in the entire kingdom, which could be seen from anywhere in the city. The elves and dwarves built the castle atop a mountain with a beautiful ocean backdrop behind them. Michael, Gaia, and Eve stepped into a dimly lit room where they noticed 2 guards sleeping peacefully. The 2 guards wore pale red robes, symbolizing their roots in House Rotgard. With a flick of her wrist, Gaia took out a dagger to cut their throats in their sleep. However, Michael stopped her. Let them be. Michael opened the window slowly to jump outside instead of killing them. The trio landed between 2 buildings built with gray brick stones. The sun was still on the horizon, slowly rising to light the dark alleyways. Michael quickly removed his mask and put on his usual black robes before walking out of the dark alley and stepping onto the street. Considering it was still early in the morning, the streets weren't as crowded as one would expect. Rather, only the early birds walked out of their homes to start their days. Most of them were elves. The air itself smelled rich and sweet, just like the elves. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ing experience, this way, Eve and Gaia said at the same time and looked at each other, smiling. You lead the way, Eve told Gaia before taking out a healing potion. You'll be all right. We are close to the cure. Michael patted Eve on the back as Gaia walked forward, leading them to the Aqua Palace. The elves on the streets threw a cold glance at the trio, showing their irritation towards humans and foreigners. Fucking elves, Gaia suppressed her anger and cursed them in a low-pitched voice. She rarely muffled her voice, yet even Gaia didn't dare to offend the elves, knowing the rules and punishments. The streets were brightly lit with blue street lamps. Many were put out since the sun has risen on the horizon. How far is it? Michael asked, walking on the street straight as an arrow. While following Gaia, Michael noticed the castle atop the mountain in the distance. Looking at the castle, he couldn't help imagining a castle of his own. But, at the moment, he just sighed and followed Michael without noticing Eve's gaze on him. Michael had a hard time believing Gaia when she said there was no poor in R until he noticed the elegant buildings on either side of the street. He had seen at least 50 elves, and none of them looked slightly poor. Instead, they looked like the nobles in Elon, even the elf carrying a bucket full of bread. He just walked behind Gaia, observing his surroundings and breathing the rich sweet air. To be honest, it felt like he had stepped into another world. The palace screamed fantasy and grandeur with all the marble buildings, elves, and glowing runes on the walls. Moreover, the concentration of arch energy was so thick that he almost wished he could cultivate like others. After we deal with everything, we should stay here for some time and cultivate, Michael said to Gaia. You know, if you want to cultivate, you should rent the aqua garden. Eve informed them as she used to cultivate in the aqua garden. As the name suggested, it was a gigantic garden with a high concentration of arch and celestial energy. There were several private cabins built in the garden for cultivation. One could rent these cabins according to their preference and cultivate if they had wealth. Of course, the cabins were categorized into several categories such as lotus, lily, jasmine, and green leaf. The lotus cabin was the costliest, while the green leaf was the cheapest. But the cheapest green leaf cabin would cost 40,000 gold coins for 2 days. Although Michael didn't need any energy-concentrated places like others, he wanted to give Gaia the best place to get stronger. With his 40% boost from the system, Gaia could break through to the soul refining stage in a few weeks if she stayed here. Oh right. Gaia dragged her words. Visit. For a better user experience unlike Eve, Michael felt something was amiss. But he couldn't ask her in front of Eve. So Michael just pretended not to notice anything and followed her behind in silence. Almost 15 minutes later, they turned left in the street and reached the pier, where Michael noticed several boats of various sizes docked. The ocean breeze swept across his face as the sight of the rising sun on the horizon captivated his mind. Then, for a few moments, he just leaned against the railings and watched the sunrise and the majestic lotus-shaped glass building on a tiny island. The glass building was a peak of architectural beauty and mastery. The golden sun rays illuminated the building and made it look like a giant lotus floating on the ocean. Sorry to disturb your sightseeing, but we are in a rush, Gaia flicked his ears, snapping him back to reality. I'll go rent a boat. Gaia turned around and went to the line of boats adjacent to the long wooden pier. While Gaia was hiring a boat, Eve joined Michael in sightseeing. It was more like resting her body than sightseeing. She wanted to lean against the rail to regain some strength. How are you doing? Michael asked. Better than the most, I guess. Eve took a deep breath. Michael could see the dark circles under her eyes and the paleness of her skin. Her condition was worsening by the minute. If it wasn't for the healing potion, she would have lost consciousness. It's gonna be all right. We go to the Aqua Palace, buy everything I need to brew the cure and cure everyone. Easy as that, Michael smiled. How can you be so sure? Because I have the formula and knowledge. I'm not bragging, but I am better than all your heavenly alchemists. It's only a matter of time before I get to the 6-star level. I know it's hard to believe until you see the cure in action, but have some faith. Why do you think I'm here? I have faith in you, Ghost, even though we barely know each other. We went through life or death battles. Eve, visit. For a better user experience, not sure about the second one. That was an outright massacre. You will be a god walking among mortals with the potion of yours. You killed fusion stage cultivators like they were nothing. Be careful, Ghost, many would literally kill you to have a power like that. Want you and Voldegards protect me? Michael grinned again as Eve sighed. In case you haven't noticed, Voldegards are in need of protection. However, I will do my best to help you however I can. We still have some connections in Ysirius. Michael really appreciated Eve. Even when they were down, she agreed to help him. People like them would be hard to find. Besides, Voldegards reminded Michael of the Sunrise sect. When he first met Claire and the elders in the Heaven's Gate competition, they were the weakest sect on the continent. But nowadays, the Sunrise sect was on its way to rivaling the 3 big sects themselves. So it was only a matter of time before Voldegards regained their former glory with the help of Michael. At first, it would look like Michael helping them, but in the future, they would be one of his strongest allies in our. When we have the cure in our hands, we can play gods in your kingdom. Eve, you really are something, Eve chuckled after hearing his words. For now, she just wanted to cure her family more than anything. Let's go. Finally, Gaia finished negotiating and came to their side. Eve emptied another healing potion before following Gaia behind to a rowboat big enough to hold 4 people, including the skipper, who was a brawny human. Welcome aboard, the man said in a thick voice and expressionless face when Gaia slowly stepped into the boat. Next, she helped Eve get on board, and lastly, Michael. Next stop, the Aqua Palace. Gaia rubbed her palms together, showing her excitement. In a few days, they would earn millions by selling the cure throughout Thera. Visit. For a better user experience. Michael uttered no word while they were on their way to Aqua Island. They only had to stop once before reaching the island to pay the entry fee. For a moment, Michael was speechless when a guard adorning in aqua blue robes asked them to pay 10,000 gold coins as an entry fee. One could buy a healing potion for 9,000 gold coins in Elon. Calculating how many gold coins the Aqua Palace would earn in a month alone made Michael jealous of the Aqua Palace. In reality, the Aqua Palace had a monthly income of 50 million in gold coins. In addition, they received rare artifacts, herbs, and ores as another source of income. Eventually, after 20 minutes of rowing the boat, they reached the island. Do I have to wait here? The man asked Gaia, but she shook her head. No need. Gaia stepped onto the dock and helped Eve. The Aqua Palace looked more majestic closer than when Michael looked at it from the pier. Michael activated his X-ray vision to see countless glowing runes etched on each glass petal which could easily contain 100 humans. Aqua Palace held the #1 spot for being majestic and grandeur among all the buildings Michael had seen in this world. Imagine a giant lotus made of glass and glistening in the sunlight. To Michael's surprise, there weren't many guards patrolling the premises. In fact, it was void of any guards. However, that didn't mean the Aqua Palace was vulnerable. Instead, hundreds of runes and magical arrays, including killing and illusion arrays, protected the Aqua Palace, leading to minimal use of actual guards. The Aqua Palace wanted its customers to feel at home and offered high-quality customer service. They believed having guards patrolling the premises would make the customers feel like they were inside a military base. Hence, they used arrays and runes instead of guards. To those who had no guide like Gaia, the Aqua Palace placed markers pointing the visitors towards the front door. It was so easy to get lost on the island without any supervision. So, who owns the Aqua Palace? Michael asked, following Gaia. The Arctic Hall of the Sea Folks. This is one of the very few establishments of the Sea Folks, Gaia answered Michael. Sea Folks, huh? We don't hear about them often, do we? That's because we live in Elon. In R, they are quite famous. Are you from R, Elia? After hearing Gaia, Eve couldn't help asking. Elia seemed to know much more about R than Eve expected her to. It was quite surprising for a resident of Elon to know a lot about R unless Elia had some kind of connection with R. She travels a lot, Michael answered Eve and asked more questions about the Aqua Palace. It was an excellent time to learn more about R and Aqua Palace since it would take at least 10 minutes of walking to reach the front door. However, the water fountains, flower beds, and butterflies made walking a soothing experience. Aqua Palace was one of the most well-maintained places in R. On one side was a bed of sunflowers, except these flowers had bright blue petals. On the other side, the red maple trees provided shade as well as carpeted the pavement with their red leaves. Visit. For a better user experience, the trees looked ancient and well pruned. I thought Aqua Palace was owned by the Empress. Most people think that. But they don't know that the Empress owns this island, not the Aqua Palace, Eve explained to Michael. Isn't the Arctic Hall one of the 3 major factions of the Sea Folks? Michael recalled everything he heard about the Sea Folks from Layla Alden. Gaia and Eve nodded. Unlike the Water God Hall and Sea Serpent Hall, Arctic Hall is split into 3 houses. House of Dathomir, House of Megaloids, and House of Halrid. Gaia yet again surprised Eve with her knowledge about the Sea Folks. Thank the gods they don't step onto the land. Now that I think about it, I want to see who will win the award of being the first-class bitch, elves, or the sea fuckers, Gaia whispered and giggled. Well, be careful what you wish for. You might see them soon enough. Michael and Gaia immediately stopped walking. What do you mean? Asked Michael. Don't you know? House Halrid has put a base in Azair. We had to send in some construction materials before the plague. Rumor has they are joining the hunt for the Dark Lord. A cold chill ran down her spine as soon as Gaia heard Eve. She even began to sweat beneath her robes. Dealing with guardians was difficult enough, and now House Halrid had joined the hunt, which meant the Arctic Hall had come to hunt down the Dark Lord. At that moment, they learned their lives had become several times more complicated and hard. Visit. For a better user experience, however, Michael remained calm because he anticipated this. He wouldn't be surprised even if the Sky Hall itself joined the hunt. It was only a matter of time before new powers sought to destroy the Dark Lord. Nowadays, everyone seeks to find the Dark Lord. Michael smiled as he resumed walking towards the front door. Although Eve had more things to worry about than the Dark Lord, she curiously asked about the Dark Lord. What's your thoughts on the Dark Lord? If I'm right, he hunts down the nobles in Elon. After reading that the Guardians hid the vampire's existence from the world, I don't think we can trust them to apprehend the Dark Lord. They might have even known about him all this time and done nothing to stop him, Eve sighed. I think we don't have to worry about the Dark Lord, Eve. Each of us has enough problems to deal with. He is the Guardian's problem. If they couldn't stop him, there are 7 more great clans. If you ask me, don't believe everything the great 8 clans and the Guardians say. Who knows? The Dark Lord might be what this world needs, Gaia chuckled, putting the seed of doubt in Eve's mind. Suppose Ghost's secret got exposed, they would need as many allies as possible. But what Gaia didn't know was Eve stood beside the Dark Lord until she drew her last breath. Eve's death affected the future Dark Lord as much as the death of Nightmare. Their deaths put Michael on a path to building a time machine that sent Michael back in time. He sacrificed everything he built to bring back everyone he lost. The moment the Dark Lord traveled back in time, he had become the past, and the current Michael became the present. Yeah, keep an open mind, and you won't be disappointed, Michael patted Eve on the shoulder. Finally, they reached a set of white stairs leading up to a set of burnished golden doors. The doors were flanked by a towering orc standing 7 feet and carrying a spear taller than him in a uniform of silver plate armor. The orc said nothing as he opened the door for the 3 of them. Thank you, Michi nodded before entering the Aqua Palace. The Aqua Palaces inside looked just as majestic as outside. At that moment, they were standing in a spacious hall under the glass roof and a humongous-sized chandelier big enough to illuminate the entire building at night. As expected, several lounges were set up for the customers to sit and rest with rare exotic flower plants for decorations. Michael also noticed several half-elves walking around the hall serving drinks and beverages to the elves in the lounges, reading royal news. Some of the elves craned their necks to take a look at the 3 of them. After seeing they were humans, they snickered and took their gazes away. Ignoring those elves, Michael, Gaia, and Eve walked toward the marble counter at the end of the hall. Welcome to Aqua Palace. I am Zen the Vermes. How may I help you today? As expected, they were welcomed by an angelic elven beauty. However, unlike those racist elves, the girl showed no emotions but delight on her face when she greeted them with a wide grin. We are looking to buy some alchemy ingredients. Gaia took the lead as Michael walked around the place like he owned the place. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ing experience, does my lady have a VIP card? If not, you have to buy a token for 7,000 gold coins and wait for your turn. We will provide you with drinks and beverages, on the house, of course. You're new here? Where is Velitha? Eve asked, surprising the smiling elf. Here, with a flick of her wrist, Eve took out a deep blue card with the words Voldegards engraved in golden letters under the Aqua Palace crest, a water droplet encircled by 2 sea dragons. Forgive me for not recognizing you, my lady. You must be Lady Eve Voldegard. The girl quickly bowed with the utmost respect. We are in a rush, Zenda. So I would appreciate it if you get me these items as quickly as possible, of course. Myriad, Zenda clapped as another elven girl dressed in emerald green robes walked out of the door behind Zenda. Take my Lady Eve Voldegard to Master Aloba, Zenda instructed Myriad and turned her gaze back to Gaia and Eve. Master Aloba is our head of the alchemy section, and he will be glad to help you. With a wave of her hand, Zenda made the marble counter slide open for Myriad. Afterward, the elf began to lead them to Master Aloba. Looking at Eve and Gaia following an elf behind, Michael stopped gawking around and followed them behind. The elf led them to the glass stairs to the second floor, which contained several stairs leading to various branches in the building, but they didn't take any stairs. Instead, they followed the elf to a jade stone door. Master Aloba is inside, my lady, my lord, the elf said in a melodious voice as Gaia pushed open the door. Thank you, Michael nodded before following Gaia through the door. As soon as Michael entered the room, he felt like he had entered a penthouse instead of a showroom. Take a seat, surprisingly, a dark elf greeted them, sitting behind an oak table flanked by black roses the size of a small child. The man looked similar to the dark elves Michael met in Essia village. Like them, the room's dark elf had silvery hair and brownish skin. They could see thin lines of a tattoo design behind the dark elf's green robes but couldn't make out the complete design. As they approached the dark elf, 3 wooden chairs emerged from the ground for them to sit. Eve and Gaia glanced around the room yet found not a single herb or an ingredient in the room. All they could find were book racks, wooden tables with parchments, and a giant portrait of the dark elf before them. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ing experience, tell me, what do you need? Ebola wasn't a man of many words. So he jumped straight into business without beating around the bushes. While waiting for Gaia to take out the list, Michael noticed the dark elf looking at Eve like he was scanning her. Luckily, the dark elf said no words, but Michael was sure the dark elf found Eve was sick. Master Aloba glanced at the list of items Michael wrote on the paper without showing any kind of expression on his face. A few seconds later, Ebola finally looked up at the 3 of them. Among the 3, Eve was the most nervous one as her family's fate depended on the availability of the ingredients. That explained why Eve was shaking her legs under the table non-stop. Luckily, the answer Aloba gave them immediately elevated Eve's mood. We have everything on the list. It will be 400,000 gold coins after minusing the special discount for VIP card holders. Wonderful. Well, take it, Michael beamed with joy as the dark elf nodded, showing no expression. Ebola looked like an employee who hated to come to the job he hated the most but had no choice. But, regardless of how Aloba behaved, Michael didn't mind him because he was not here to enjoy the hospitality. Wait here, Ebola rose from his chair and went to the door beside a wooden rack. How long will it take you to make the cure? Eve jerked her head in Michael's direction as soon as Aloba disappeared into the room. 5 minutes, hear me out, will you? Gaia leaned closer to them with a plan to get super rich in her mind. It had always been Gaia's job to multiply their income, and Michael let Gaia deal with the business side of things to Gaia. She was undoubtedly better than him regarding business and financial stuff. As soon as we get the ingredients, he will make the cure and give it to you. So go home and cure your family. What will you do? Eve asked Gaia and Michael, who looked at Gaia for her answer. Promote the cure. Hearing the door creaking open again, Gaia quickly shut her mouth and leaned back on her chair. To their surprise, Ebola didn't come out carrying any ingredients. Instead, he returned to his seat and slides a silver ring toward Michael. Check if everything is there. Michael took the space ring, sending a sliver of arch energy to view the ingredients stored inside the space ring. It took Michael only a couple of seconds to confirm everything he asked for was inside. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ing experience, cool. Everything there, you can receive the ring back at the counter after you make your payment. Do you need anything else? Michael shook his head, standing up. Thank you. Michael just nodded before returning the ring to Aloba and walking out of the room. When they stepped outside, Myriad was waiting for them. My lady, my lord, have you finished your purchase? Myriad asked with a gentle grin that multiplied her beauty by several folds. Yep. Back to the counter, Gaia said as Eve was already on her way to the counter in a rush. She couldn't wait, and if it wasn't for the rule of no use of arch-energy inside the Aqua Palace, she would have flown to the counter. Despite seeing Eve rushing down the stairs, Myriad did not change her expression. Instead, she led them back to where they came from and reached the counter. However, Eve had already paid the amount using her pay cube and waited for Michael and Gaia with the silver space ring in her hand. Let's go, Eve rushed Michael. Zenda, would like to use your portal to get to you serious. How much will that cost us again? Gaia asked Zenda behind the counter. 5,000 gold coins, my lady. Would you like Myriad to lead you to the portal? Is there somewhere we could quickly brew a potion? Gaia asked as Zenda nodded. Since my lady belongs to the proud house of Voldegards, you can use the VIP lounge of Voldegards. Only after hearing Zenda did Eve remember that they have a lounge in Aqua Palace. The latest _AP_SODIs are on the website. Put a pin on the portal. We will get back to you. Now if you may, please lead the way to the Voldegards lounge, Michael asked Myriad as the elf once again led them towards the staircase. Like before, they climbed the stairs and arrived at a junction where they saw several stairs to the various parts of the building. This time, Myriad led them to the southeast staircase leading to the highest floor. Once they climbed the last staircase, they were welcomed by a brightly lit corridor. The corridor walls were painted in charcoal black and complemented by the walls with shiny marble floors. Instead of chandeliers, the runes engraved on the ceiling lit the place and gave a modernized feeling to the corridor. This way, my lord and my lady, Myriad politely said and walked in front of them. She didn't even ask why she had to lead Eve to her own lounge. Although Eve had visited her lounge a couple of times to attend the auctions, at this moment, the distance between them and her lounge felt like an eternity. After passing through a few doors, Michael's gaze landed on the door with the name The Barns engraved. As soon as he saw the name, his blood boiled, and his eyes reddened. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stay calm whenever he saw something related to Thusia. Luckily, Gaia noticed the name and dragged Michael away from the door. Finally, after passing the door with the door named The Hunt Family, they came before the door with the Voldegards engraved in golden letters. Eve quickly flicked her wrist, taking out the VIP card. The runes brightly lit up when she placed the card on the door, and then the door clicked open. You don't have to wait for us. Well, meet Zenda in a while, Michael dismissed Myria before stepping into the Voldegards lounge. The room itself was round, warm, and welcoming. There were lots of dark purple hangings, burnished black metal, and overstuffed sofas and armchairs upholstered in purple and black. The glass wall provided a view of a humongous stadium with thousands of seats around and a grass field in the center. This was the auction stage allocated for only special annual auctions. The stadium was big enough to rival the biggest football stadiums on Earth. The sunlight coming directly above that brightened the grass field like a natural spotlight, made the auction stadium more majestic. The Voldegards lounge also had a large, purple, wooden mantelpiece with carvings of a Pegasus on it. This was located underneath a portrait of a black-haired man wearing dark purple robes and carrying a golden crane decorated with a large ruby on top. He was the current House Lord of House Voldegard and also Eve's father, Julian Voldegard. In addition, various rose plants grown in tiny pots stood on wooden circular shewer curved to fit the walls, and copper-bottomed plant holders dangled amid the ceiling with ferns and ivies. Michael immediately conjured the emerald green alchemy flames as Eve and Gaia felt the heat radiating from the flames. While the flames were dancing above his palm, Gaia waved her hand as various ingredients materialized on the glass table before them. The anticipation to see the cure prevented Eve from plunging into the overstuffed sofa. Instead, she stood still, looking at Michael throwing ingredient after ingredient into the flame to refine them. Relax, he got this, Gaia calmly said to calm Eve's nerves and stop her from shivering. But her words alone weren't enough to calm Eve down. The following minutes dragged forever as Eve stared at the colorful beads emerging from the flame without batting an eye. On the other hand, Gaia couldn't hold her excitement. Even the crackling sound resembling wood crack in the fire sounded like music to her. To Michael, however, there wasn't anything dramatic but business as usual. He knew the formula and had all the ingredients. So brewing the potion wasn't a difficult task. After a long couple of minutes, Eve finally saw a sparkling purple liquid dance above the green flames. Soon, the air became sweeter, and they could smell lavender in the air. The liquid danced according to Michael's movement. Finally, after the green flames disappeared, he turned his gaze towards Eve. Visit. For a better user experience, open your mouth. Without asking any questions, Eve opened her mouth like a child as Michael moved the potion into her mouth. Michael and Gaia waited for Eve to swallow the potion. A few seconds later, Eve just closed her eyes, feeling the warm sensation all over her body. To be honest, she couldn't help closing her eyes and smiling. It felt like an eternity since she experienced the warmth of arch-energy running through her energy veins. Little by little, her strength returned to her body, and so did the rosiness of her skin. Eve took several deep breaths before finally opening her eyes. "You're cured," Michael just smiled despite having performed a miracle. On the other hand, Gaia tiptoed, trying to control her excitement. "How do you feel?" Gaia asked, stepping towards Eve. "Great. I am actually cured." "You did it." Eve's eyes turned watery, and a few drops of tears rolled out of her eyes. Following her tears, Eve let out a relieved smile. "Ow," but suddenly, Eve dashed at them and hugged Gaia and Michael tightly. Thank you so much." Eve could barely speak those words through the lump in her throat. She felt relieved and delighted at the same time. With the cure, she would be able to cure all her family. "Just promise me you won't hug us again after you cure your family." Since Gaia wasn't a big fan of hugging people except for Michael, she declared with a sigh. "I told you I have the cure." Michael patted Eve's back and gently pushed Eve away to wipe her tears. "Now just give me a few minutes." Michael conjured his flames again to brew more cures for Eve's family. It took Michael almost 15 minutes to brew 20 potions. In the meantime, Gaia and Eve discussed distributing the cure and opening a majestic store in Ysirius. Since the Voldigares owned many properties in Ysirius, Eve insisted Gaia take one of her buildings and establish the majestic. The business-minded Gaia naturally accepted such an offer and agreed with a wide ear-to-ear grin. Visit. For a better user experience. Michael put the cure inside his space ring before walking out of the room with Eve and Gaia. The trio directly went to the counter. "My lord, my lady," Zenda greeted them with the brightest smile as though she was meeting them for the first time. "Take her to the portal," Gaia asked Zenda as Eve quickly took out the pay cube. The purple cube glowed in Zenda's hands. The light shot out from the cube formed the number 5000. After the number faded away, Myriad approached them again. "If you may, my lady," Myriad gestured at Eve to follow her. "We will meet you after we are done here." Michael patted her shoulder with a nod. "Take this." Eve handed over the VIP card to Michael. Afterwards, Eve didn't linger any longer as she nodded at Michael and Gaia before following Myriad to the portal. This time, they didn't go to the stairs but walked around the hall and disappeared through a door. "Zenda, if we want to put something precious in an auction, who should we meet?" Gaia leaned on the marble counter and asked Zenda in a low-pitched voice. "I can take the item and take it to our appraisers, my lady." However, Gaia shook her head. "I was thinking about meeting the one in charge of the annual. The item we have can save thousands of people. So it's pretty important. Since you have a VIP card, I can arrange a meeting with our manager Lord Anfaler." "My lady, that would be great." Gaia grinned from ear to ear. "Please wait a few minutes." "My lady, my lord." Zenda turned around, walking into the room behind her. "They can't figure out the formula using the list of ingredients we bought, right?" Gaia whispered to Michael. She knew many alchemists who had recreated someone else's potion or pill formula by bribing the place where the alchemist buys the ingredients. For example, suppose an alchemist had a list of ingredients to refine a particular pill or potion. In that case, they could eventually come up with the formula. That was why many alchemists keep the list of ingredients needed for a potion or pill a secret and only buy the ingredients from a highly reputed place. Although Aqua Place was a highly reputed place, she didn't trust the elves. The latest _AP_SODIs are on _the website. I am not an amateur. I didn't need half the items in that list. Even the heavenly alchemists won't be able to find my formula, Michael smirked. Among the ingredients they bought, Michael only used a few of them because he wrote others to confuse if anyone tried to recreate the formula using the list. Michael didn't trust the elves either. They waited for another couple of minutes, and finally, Zenda walked out of the room again. Lord Anfaler will meet you now, my lord, my lady. Go straight and enter the third door on the left. Instead of leading them, Zenda provided them with instructions. Thank you, Michael nodded with a smile and entered through the door. Many of the elves in the hall creased their brows, seeing Michael entering the staff-only place. They wondered what the human was up to and who he was. They already began to murmur among themselves to find out who he was. Typically, they wouldn't bother with a human, but after seeing his cultivation level, they were startled. After all, every fusion stage cultivator they had met was old. Even Layla Alden wasn't as young as Michael when she reached the fusion stage. Michael, on the other hand, was flooded with system notifications. He received 20,000 badass points in a few minutes, literally doing nothing. Ignoring the notifications, Michael walked into the brightly lit corridor resembling the one upstairs. This is the place, Gaia said, looking at the name Anfaler Hurdy engraved in gold on the red oak door. Please come in. Suddenly, a chill, warm and welcoming voice came from the other side as though someone inside sensed them waiting outside. Michael opened the door to see an arranged room and an elf behind a glass table. The elf who greeted them bore a welcoming smile on his face. Unlike Aloba, the elf radiated warmth and friendliness. Like any elf, Anfelin was blessed with perfect jaw structure, glossy skin, striking blonde hair, and hazel eyes. He was tall enough to be considered a tall man, and despite his soul-refining stage cultivation, he looked approachable. It was quite slurping to see an elf smiling so widely and being so welcoming to them. Normally, the elves would be cold towards anyone except elves. Please be seated. Would you like some freshly brewed tea? The elf pointed at the marble cup and tea saucer set on the glass table. No, thanks, Lord Anfaler. Michael politely rejected the offer as the elf sat before them. So I heard you have something valuable to add to our annual auction. Normally, we wouldn't take any item at this point, but since you're friends of Lady Eve, we can make an exception. Anfaler leaned forward. Have you heard of the plague in there, Lord Anfaler? Regardless of how much she hated the elves, she talked to Anfaler with a face full of smiles. Of course, bad business. Her Imperial Majesty will soon declare the lockdown, and I hope they come up with a cure. Otherwise, who knows how many lives would be lost to the plague. That's what we wanted to auction, the cure for the plague. As soon as Anfaler heard Gaia, the smile on his face froze. But soon, he snapped out of the surprise. Here, Michael retrieved the potion from his system storage and placed it on the table. Visit. For a better user experience, 90% pure. It will cure the sickness in a couple of minutes. No side effects, Gaia explained as Anfaler took the potion to examine it closer. If I may, where did you find this? I brewed it. Are you an alchemist? The alchemist. I am sure you have heard of Ghost, the #1 alchemist of Elon and probably Azair, your ghost? Anfaler was pleasantly surprised to see a young prodigy like Michael in person. Even in R, many related to the alchemy field have heard about Michael, especially after what happened in Azair during the alchemy competition. Anfaler was one of the elves who admired and respected Michael despite their racial differences. One and only, Michael nodded. I have to ask. If you have the cure, why not sell them yourself? If I am right, you have a store. Don't get me wrong, the cure is a big thing. But I don't think it'll be worth the while to put it in the auction. Somehow Michael wasn't surprised to hear his words. Merchants like him would always put profits and well-being of their own above everything else. Hear me out, Lord Phelan. We don't want you to auction the cure and give us the coins. Whatever you make with the cure by selling it, you can have it all. Gaia initiated the negotiation as Phelan turned his gaze towards Gaia. Let me get this straight. You want us to auction the cure and take all the coins ourselves. You don't want anything, correct? Gaia nodded. You can have it all. We don't want a single coin, and Phelan was speechless until Gaia explained her plans to him. You will get coins, and get promotion in one of the biggest stages. It's a win-win situation. Moreover, we are planning to venture into the treacherous ocean. If you do this favor, choose the Aqua Palace to auction the rare items we get there. Visit. For a better user experience, Gaia sweetened the pot by mentioning the treacherous ocean. For a few moments, the elf was completely taken aback by surprise. Of course, no sane one would venture into the treacherous ocean voluntarily. Still, after seeing Ghost's cultivation level, Phelan didn't think they would surely die. Besides, it was a great deal for the Aqua Palace. They would be the first ones to introduce the cure. First, however, Phelan wanted to check if they really had the cure. Have you tested the cure? Phelan asked without agreeing to Gaia's terms yet. Yes. We cured the Voldegards with the cure. Here, take this and test it on a sick one. Gaia placed another potion on the table. Phelan didn't say no to another potion. He had a sick one as Aqua Palace was researching the plague and trying to find a cure. In fact, every single major organization was working hard to come up with a cure. Whoever finds the cure first could earn millions as well as the Empress' favor. I'll be with you in a few minutes. Please make yourselves at home. Taking the 2 potions, Phelan left the room, leaving Michael and Gaia behind. Although Phelan left the room, several recording stones were hidden in places such as inside the chandelier above, behind the bear statue on the table, and on top of a portrait watching Michael and Gaia. They were like CCTV cameras recording everything. Michael could easily disable them with the system. But instead, Michael put his hands behind him and released the spiders. The little spiders quickly camouflaged themselves with the environment and crawled away. Since they were being watched, Michael and Gaia didn't speak to each other. Instead, they acted casual and stared at the big stadium outside. The auction is next week, right? Gaia nodded. This was the only conversation they had until Phelan returned almost after 10 minutes. Sorry for keeping you waiting, so what your scholars tell you, Lord Phelan? Michael asked, seeing Phelan not answering. Michael smiled. Oh, come on, Lord Phelan, you have to test the cure. I completely understand that. How can you take something and accept it as a cure for the plague? Phelan looked a bit flustered because of the cure's effectiveness. The Aqua Palace had a few sicknesses underground and studied them to find the cure. So Phelan just had to give the potion to one of the test subjects to validate the potion. Every scholar, alchemist, and healer responsible for finding the cure was completely startled when they saw the potion cure the sick in a couple of minutes. The cure was legit. The Aqua Palace wasn't swindlers. Many others would have said the cure was fake, killed Ghost, and tried to replicate the potion to sell the potions themselves. If they wanted Ghost dead, the Aqua Palace had all the resources to kill him despite his cultivation level. However, that is not how Aqua Palace conducted business. The latest _AP_SODIs are on the website. I can put the cure to the auction, but the Aqua Palace needs something else. Phelan may be warm, welcoming, and friendly, but he was still a merchant in blood. So Michael and Gaia weren't surprised to see him asking for something in return and negotiating for more. But, to be honest, they were both expecting. Please, Michael gestured at Phelan to continue. The Aqua Palace wants to help you distribute the cure throughout the continent, Master Ghost. Michael's smile disappeared as he creased his brows. What do you mean throughout the continent, Lord Phelan? The last time I heard, only Thera has this plague. Phelan leaned forward and talked in a low-pitched voice. Can I trust that you won't tell a soul what I am about to tell you? Of course, Lord Phelan. You have my word, Michael nodded. The plague isn't restricted to Thera. A village has been put under lockdown in Sil Allery. We heard the news that people are also turning up with the same plague symptoms in other kingdoms. Each kingdom is doing its best to contain the news, but eventually, the news will spread across the continent. Soon, the Molten Plague will affect the entire continent. Molten Plague. That's what they named the plague? And Phelan nodded at Gaia and turned his gaze back at Michael. So basically I am sitting on a gold mine? And Phelan saw a cold opportunistic grin on Ghost's face that showed his other side. A gold mine that puts a target on your back, and Phelan said in a grave voice. I know you've been using the Rainshade Merchant Guild to distribute your products. No offense to them, but they won't be able to handle this. Because the moment the Molten Plague breaks out, the continent will be turned upside down. Those who weren't affected will run around like rabid dogs, and if they heard there's a cure, they would go to any length to get their hands on it. Forget about the cure, the rogues will target the source. The Rainshade Guild's strongest is a soul refiner. How could they fight against fusion stage cultivators? The latest _AP_SODIs are on the website. The news was simply too shocking to Gaia. If what Phelan said was true, even the Empress isn't safe anymore. No matter how big of an army she had, no one could fight the plague. She wouldn't be surprised if the Aqua Palace itself sabotaged their supply lines and blamed it on the rogue cultivators. But, as far as she was concerned, Phelan was a good guy to extend a helping hand instead of sabotaging them or simply killing them. So let's negotiate, Lord Phelan. What's the Aqua Palace's cut? 30%, Gaia immediately shook her head. 25%, and you will provide us with ingredients. Gaia gave Phelan her counteroffer, and surprisingly, he considered it for a few moments. Yet, he didn't simply agree to Gaia's terms. Instead, the both of them began to negotiate for almost 30 minutes. Their negotiation felt like a battle. But, to Michael's surprise, it was quite entertaining to see Gaia negotiate. She would have been a successful CEO of a major enterprise if she was born on Earth. Phelan had the experience, but Gaia had talent, pure natural talent for business. When they ended their negotiation, Phelan agreed to take a 20% cut and supply them with all the ingredients. In return, Michael had to give them exclusivity to the cure. That meant the Aqua Place would get 20% wherever he sells the cure. Even if he sells the cure in Majestic, a 20% cut had to be paid to the Aqua Palace. On top of getting free ingredients, Michael would get the protection of the Aqua Palace. In addition, Phelan would help Ghost get a VIP card in Aqua Palace. Gaia tried to get a VIP card as a part of the deal, but it wasn't in the hands of Phelan. So instead, the Arctic Hall would decide who to give the VIP card to every 5 years. Unfortunately, they offered new VIP cards last year, so Michael had to wait for 4 more years. Where should I send the contract to? To the Voldegard's mansion. I'll be staying there, said Michael as Phelan made a mental note. When can we expect the first batch of Cure Master Ghost? Let the Molten Plague spread more, Lord Phelan. Phelan's jaw dropped a couple of inches when he heard Michael. Not that Phelan hadn't seen ruthless people, but he didn't expect Ghost to be this cruel. He looked like such a warm, gentle young man, but his words made Phelan think Ghost was more brutal than he seemed. We can start distributing the cure after the auction. That'd be enough for everyone to panic and feel desperate for the cure. Meanwhile, we will provide the people with healing potions. It will keep the people alive. Gaia leaned back and said to Phelan, speaking of healing potions, I heard someone is hoarding my potions and selling them for a high price, Lord Phelan. Do you have any idea where I could find such a person? Visit. For a better user experience, Michael was right to ask Lord Phelan because the black market was a huge headache for the merchants in AR. What they do is buy a particular product in bulk and hoard it until the product is not available for the consumers. By doing this, they raised the demand too high, and when the people were desperate, they would sell it for a high price. As a result, black marketers made millions. It was really unfortunate Michael's healing potions drew the attention of these black marketers. It's not a single-person master ghost but rather a shadow organization who simply calls themselves the Black Marketers. They lack creativity, unlike wealth. Every merchant guild has been affected by them. Although we would like to track them down and bring them to justice, it's not an easy task. To be honest, it's pretty impossible. They weren't found because I haven't tried Lord N. Phelan, Michael smirked. With the devices Michael had under his disposal, it would be a matter of time before Michael found the black marketers. They made a massive mistake by scalping Michael's healing potions. And Phelan had a feeling the black marketers may have just made a nemesis they shouldn't have. Anyways, if ghosts somehow got rid of the black marketers, it would be profitable to all the merchant guilds, including the Aqua Palace. Then, we will see you next week. Gaia stood up to leave the room. They'll be waiting, and Phelan shook both their hands firmly before walking them out as a courtesy. After talking to Phelan, Michael was glad he attended the alchemy competition and received the token to bid. According to Phelan, even he couldn't give any more tokens. If Michael didn't get it from the Alchemists Guild, he couldn't have taken part in the bidding and depended on Eve to bid for him. You really embraced the darkness, huh? Gaia asked after Phelan sent them away. I didn't create or spread the plague. I am just taking advantage of it. Michael didn't feel any remorse at all. He wasn't Noah to run around the continent and try to cure every single sick person. Instead, Michael decided to wait until R was pushed to the brink of destruction. Then, he would come up with the cure and earn millions. The vampires spread the plague, but Michael was the one who will reap the benefits. Michael and Gaia directly went to the counter and received another space ring with enough ingredients to brew the first batch of cures. Would like to use the portal to Ysirius now, Zenda. Michael took out his pay cube and handed it over to Zenda. Then, just like before, the number 5000 appeared in the form of a holograph above the pay cube. It was the middle of the day when Michael and Gaia appeared in the sky out of nowhere. Unlike the portals they'd been using before, the portal in Aqua Palace teleported them to the sky above Ysirius instead of into a building. The drizzling clouds added an extra layer of gloominess to the already plague-stricken city. The air itself turned slightly palish green, giving the city a depressive look. Visit. For a better user experience, Michael and Gaia flew straight to the floating mountain without lingering around any longer. Finally, after almost 5 minutes of flying, the mountain appeared in their sight. Unlike before, they saw a few people gathered around Nightmare. When Michael and Gaia got closer to the island, Nightmare looked up to see them descending. Surprisingly, the carriage was nowhere to be found. Instead, all the sick ones were laid on the ground facing the open sky. Among the people, Michael locked his gaze with Eve and Jennifer, who were in the embrace of Julian Voldegard, Eve's father. There they are. Eve pointed her finger at Michael and Gaia as they landed a couple of meters away from Eve. As soon as they landed, a group of people surrounded Michael. Soon, Eve approached Michael with Jennifer, Julian, and a brown-haired lady with freckles. Michael spent almost an hour in pace brewing the potions without any distractions. He enjoyed the sight of ever-expanding clouds and the distant mountains that peeked through the clouds. It soothed his soul more than he could explain with words. The waterfall's burble sound added a certain calming effect on his mind. Standing atop the mountain peak and looking at the world down made him feel truly powerful. Even after finishing brewing the cures, Michael sat in a meditative posture and began to meditate. The clouds above him moved to his rhythm every time his chest rose up and down. He didn't notice the pebbles and mud flying in a circle around him or the dark smoke emanating from his body. Fortunately, he was too far from the people down to notice everything changes. The dark smoke slowly flew towards his palm and floated like a dark orb above his hands until the dark flames emerged from his palm and enveloped the dark smoke. Soon, the dark smoke and the dark flames merged together to form a tiny black hole that sucked every pebble flying around Michael. The black hole was only the size of a dot and still was in a weak state. The black hole wasn't a spell or any that appeared due to the system. Instead, it was one of Michael's dormant powers. The more connection he had with the darkness, the more powerful he grew. He may be a fusion stage cultivator, but he was just an amateur in terms of godhood. The Sky Hall wasn't afraid of the Dark Lord because of cultivation. They feared him because of his dormant powers. The more powerful he grew, he would unshackle the cultivation bonds and become something else entirely. At that time, his powers couldn't be calculated using the cultivation stages. No spell in the entire world could create a black hole to suck everything. Yet, a black hole was floating above Michael's palm, unknowing to him. He felt more and more connected to the darkness around him until Gaia's voice in his head severed the connection. As soon as a distraction appeared, the black hole disappeared and everything around him returned to its normal state. By the time Michael opened his eyes, he didn't notice the changes. Are the cures ready? Not to rush you, but someone is about to die if we don't give him the cure. Gaia couldn't care less about a lowly soldier of Voldegard's, and Michael could see that in her indifferent tone. I'll be there. He took a deep breath before standing up and dashing to the edge. After he left the place where he meditated, one could see a dark spiral appear in the ground for a moment, split second, and disappear. Back on the ground, a soldier had turned completely gray and his skin looked like it was made of stone. When Michael landed on the ground, he saw Lord Julian and his family surround the soldier. They all looked worried. Seeing a lord of the house worry for a foot soldier was quite a surprise. So you know how my guild works, that's true. I kinda like this place, so let's try not to do too much damage to it, okay? Michael said, cracking his neck. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience, I will try, the Reaper nodded. Then, 2 energy swords materialized in his hand. One radiated crimson red light while the other shone in bright blue. Fancy, said Michael, admiring the 2 energy swords. The battle excitement began to course through his veins. Normally, Michael would avoid battles. This fight, however, he couldn't avoid. Thus, Michael decided to use the Reaper as a dummy to test his limits. You also used to give me gifts every time I reach a new stage, Michael complained to the system. It had been quite some time since the system gifted him like it used to. With everything going on, Michael wanted to get his hands on some legendary gift boxes of the system. Stop asking for freebies and focus on upgrading the system. The system sounded kinda irritated by Michael's question. Michael didn't have time to argue with the system. Besides, he knew there was no point arguing with the system. Hence, Michael closed the system interface and flew in the direction of the Voldegard compound. While flying, Michael tried to contact Gaia through the earpiece. Where are you? Michael sighed in relief when he heard Gaia's voice. On my way to the Voldegard compound. Is everything all right? Did you have any trouble? No, answered Gaia. Things are pretty normal here. But they are preparing a lavish feast for you. Hope you're hungry. As a matter of fact, I am. All the fighting and killing made me hungry. Michael cracked his neck, producing a cracking sound in his neck. The latest _AP_SODIes are on the website. I am not surprised. The Reapers are becoming a headache. Have you managed to get the location of their guild? Gaia had the same thought about getting their location as Michael. I did. So let's pay them a visit then, but not as Ghost and Elia. Michael sensed a tinge of evilness and killing intent in her voice. It was apparent she wanted to destroy the Grim Reapers as Dark Lord and the Dark Queen. We'll talk more when I get there, Michael said before cutting the communication between them. Afterward, Michael just flew towards the castle without using the lightning dash. He enjoyed the dark clouds above him, drizzling and the wind against his face. It provided him with a captivating experience. Even after almost 2 years, Michael still had goosebumps every time he flew in the sky. After almost 30 minutes of flying under drizzling weather, Michael finally reached the Voldegard castle. But unlike when he first came to the place, it looked buzzing with soldiers and clean of any blood or dead bodies. The Voldegard foot soldiers were busy fixing the broken statues and the fountains. At the same time, the female servants swept the front lawn by casting wind spells. "Look, Master Ghost is back," informed Lady Eve. "Master Ghost." The soldiers quickly stopped what they were doing and bowed slightly toward Michael. Not a single one failed to smile at Michael with gratitude for saving their lives. However, deep within their eyes, they feared Michael. "Master Ghost," Azazel walked out of the castle gracefully and greeted Michael with a bow. "How is everything, Sebastian?" Michael asked Azazel after gesturing at the servants to continue their work. "Please, let me take care of this." Azazel waved his hand as a warm wave of energy brushed past Michael, drying all the wetness off his clothes. "What the fuck?" Gaia snapped as soon as she heard Michael. Just the thought of Sabrina being Michael's little sister boggled Gaia's mind. Her heartbeat rose rapidly to the point Gaia could hear her heart. "But why suddenly? And what makes you think she might be your little sister?" Gaia came closer to Michael, where he was setting up apparatuses and other necessary devices to do a DNA test. Typically, one would need sophisticated rituals to find out whether they were related by blood or not. But fortunately, Michael was a 5-star alchemist and an inventor with the system. So, using his knowledge at his disposal, Michael invented a device to conduct a DNA test. Gaia stared at the U-shaped contraption made of glass. The glass was split in the bottom by a metal ring, and an orb was hanging down from it. "I don't know truly. Just a nagging feeling deep down that she might be my family," Michael said to Gaia while pouring Sabrina's blood into the contraption from one opening. The blood drizzled into it and stopped by the metal right. For a few moments, Gaia stood speechless, uttering no words. "If she is by some chance, do you know what that means for us?" Gaia's voice slightly trembled. Instead of answering her question, Michael unsheathed his sword, cut his palm, and held his hand above the contraption to fill the other half with his blood. To avoid confusion, Michael carved a small M on the half with his blood. Afterward, Michael took out a bright blue potion. The potion sparkled, almost lighting the table with its radiance. When Michael opened the vial, Gaia smelled the fragrance of lavender. Michael was still silent as he gently poured the potion into both ends and waited for the blue potion to mix with both of their blood. "Now if she is my sister, a green light will be lit in the orb. Otherwise, red. Answer my question, human. What are you planning to do after if she is your sister?" Gaia asked with her brows creased together. His answer, however, completely caught Gaia off guard. "To be honest, I have no plans," Michael sighed and waited for the blue potion to turn violet. "What the fuck? I never heard these words from you before. First time for everything, huh?" Despite the seriousness of the matter, Michael remained calm. It was true that Michael had no plans if Sabrina proved to be his sister. This would mean Noah his brother, Rowena his big sister, and Diana and Ethan were his parents. He may be cold and ruthless to his enemies, but if Noah was his brother, it wouldn't be as easy as facing Noah as an enemy like any other. After all, fighting a brother was very different than fighting an enemy. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ing experience, how long will it take for the orb to light up? Gaia couldn't wait to see the result. Red or green, she wanted to know whether or not Sabrina was his little sister. That would change everything from her perspective. "Unless you want me to stay away from you, I'm not going anywhere," Michael didn't want to bring back hurtful memories by talking about Eve's love life. Rather, he wanted to talk about their future. I don't want you to go anywhere. Promise me you two will be my friends forever. Gaia didn't expect her to make such a request at all until she heard what Eve had said next visit. For a better user experience, Father and my family only know that I won't be able to break through to the next stage. But the full truth is that I am sick and don't have much longer to live. Maybe a couple of years, Eve's voice stuttered. Let me guess, the elves told you this. Although the news Eve had just revealed, Michael remained calm and had a smirk on his face. System, scan Eve and tell me if something is amiss. Michael ordered the system and paid 20,000 badass points as the price. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see any downside to locating the curse-lifting artifact and turning it into a skill. Hence, Michael agreed to let the system take 250,000 and give him the item's location. The item is hidden deep within the domain of the treacherous ocean. The coincidence surprised Michael. Since Michael had 2 more weeks before returning to Maze Roth, Michael planned to go to the treacherous ocean to harvest its resources. He never thought there was an item that could give him a legendary skill. Now that the system revealed its location to be the treacherous ocean, traveling to the treacherous ocean took priority. It settled then, Michael took a deep breath and exited the system to see Eve and Gaia staring at him. Eve, Michael smiled as he ruffled Eve's head, which caught Eve caught off guard. What are you doing? Eve miserably smiled. You still don't get it, do you? Eve looked bewildered, hearing Michael. As he moved closer, Michael put his hand around Eve's neck. Surprisingly, she didn't move away or swat his arms off. Michael then looked at the kingdom before them together. I can do whatever I want, Eve. You saw when I came up with a cure for the plague when the most genius minds in R couldn't. As a matter of fact, I challenged your father. Eve turned her gaze towards Michael as he continued. I challenged him that I will make you break through to the soul refining stage and lead House Voldegard into a golden age. Eve was speechless, and Michael didn't give her any time to react. Instead, Michael revealed a shocking truth to her. Do you know why you can't break through to the soul refining stage? You're cursed by the elves, Eve, huh? Wait, what are you talking about? Eve's heartbeat began to increase as she shuddered. On the other hand, Gaia just rolled her eyes and joined them in sightseeing the gloomy city through the open window. The latest _AP_SODIes are on _the website. I am not surprised at all. Cursing people is one of the many things those evil sons of bitches are capable of. That's why everyone hates them, and don't even get me started on the dark elves. No, I don't believe it. Eve's eyes watered as the memories of Filvander started to flood her mind. However, Michael did not stop. Instead, Michael let Eve know about the wickedness of the elves. Things like this would undoubtedly make a person strong, and Michael wanted Eve to be stronger than ever. Only then could she become ruthless enough to lead the Voldegards and probably fight beside himself against his enemies. They cursed you because they didn't want a human girl to marry their son, Eve. They planned everything and cursed you with several curses. That's the only reason you couldn't break through to the soul refining stage and hallucinate. Eve was utterly taken aback by the shock and surprise. Does Filvander know about the curses? Eve stammered, failing to believe Filvander had betrayed her. Of course, she shouldn't believe Ghost, but Eve's heart trusted Ghost more than Filvander. I don't know, but if I have to guess, I'd say yes. Michael didn't sugarcoat but told Eve what he felt. For him, it was too hard to believe a guy who truly loves a girl left her just like that because she can't break through to the next level. If he had truly loved her, he would have tried to find a way or at least spent time with her until her time came. At least, that's what he would have done. Where is he now? Gaia asked Eve while opening the door. Lord Julian said he was in Maze Roth. Michael raised his one brow. Is it Eve? Asked Gaia as Eve took a few minutes of time before slowly nodding. It was evident to Michael and Gaia that Eve was deep in thought. How can she nod after Michael had revealed the truth to her? As far as Michael was concerned, Eve handled the news pretty well. I heard the Filvander somewhere in Mazeroth. Anyways, until I break the curses, I won't break his bones. What are you talking about? Eve creased her brows, wiping off the tears from her face. Okay, I won't do anything to him, Michael shrugged, but Eve didn't believe him, not even for a second. Master Ghost, Miss Elia, Lady Eve, maid standing a few meters away in the corridor greeted them. Then, the maids led the three to the great hall where Lord Julian and Ingrid had prepared a lavish feast for Michael and Gaia. Visit. For a better user experience. If Jennifer had asked Gabriel or any other alchemists to reveal their recipe, they would have thrown her out. However, one couldn't blame Jennifer entirely, as she recently met a young man who taught her how to revive dead crops without asking for a single coin. Jennifer insisted the young man take something from her space ring, but he simply refused. The potion recipe the young man gave her would have fetched him millions if he sold it in a market. Every year, the farmers in Thera lost half of the crops or sometimes all the crops to a blight called black mist. Even the dark elves, who were masters of nature, couldn't do anything to avoid losing their crops to the black mist. As the name suggested, the black mist appeared in the form of a dark, gloomy mist, especially above the ripped crops waiting to be harvested. Even if the farmers were considerably richer than the farms on the other continents, they were still farmers who relied on crops. So losing half or full harvest was devastating to them. Jennifer, a disciple of Abraxia, one of the best academics for alchemists, wanted to find a solution to the black mist. In fact, she chose to find a solution to the black mist as her project despite her professors advising her against it. This was the reason for Jennifer's visit to Nagaland, where she met the young man who miraculously showed her how to get rid of the black mist. Although Jennifer had no ill feelings towards Ghost, that young man was undoubtedly more benevolent and kind than Ghost. Death of a subordinate. I am not taking a dig at privileged kids, but life wasn't easy for everyone. Michael took another sip and said casually. Some of us had to claw our way up, Miss Jennifer. So after reaching the top, we won't have the same kindness and compassion as you. We simply lose those feelings and put a price on everything. After all, we haven't experienced any kindness or compassion, Michael said, smiling. However, Michael took a long sip and placed the empty cup on the table again. I am not a monster either. I already made a deal with Aqua Palace. I am to distribute the cures through them starting from next week, said Michael. Next week? Jennifer creased her brows but chose not to say anything. Upon finishing the feast, the servants left the grand hall after bowing to them. They were fortunate to work for the Voldegard family. Otherwise, they wouldn't have received extra cures for their family members. After everyone left the grand hall, Michael went directly to his room and began to brew the cures in silence. On the other hand, Gaia and Nightmare sat on the bed with their eyes closed to cultivate. After all, they had to take advantage of the thick arch energy in the atmosphere. Michael placed his table facing the open window. He stared at the evening sky brewing the cure. A few hours passed in utter silence when Michael finished brewing almost 3 large crates of cures. Since there was a possibility of a Reaper coming to assassinate him, Michael remained vigilant. Before starting again to brew potions, Michael removed the broken APD and fixed it quickly. The vampire made a number to the APD while in the Shadow Realm. If he hadn't repaired the APD now, problems might arise later. Thus, Michael fixed it under the light of candles. Although they had chandeliers, Michael enjoyed the darkness. His next goal was to brew enough potions to cure 500 people. It was indeed a small number, but brewing more would take time. Fortunately, Michael had nothing to do for a week. At least that was what he thought until his vision completely turned red with the system's notifications. Warning. Subordinate Heinberg is dead. The host has lost 50,000 badass points. The latest _AP_SODIes are on the website. Michael clenched his fist when his vision was blocked by pulsating crimson-red warning boxes in front of his eyes. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. The system did not only reduce 50,000 badass points but gave him a massive headache like someone's been hitting his head with a sledgehammer. But neither the headache nor the badass points disturbed Michael. Rather, it was the notification. What the fuck? Michael furrowed his brows as he tried to contact Maxine. My lord, where is H? Michael asked, gazing at the gloomy city under the night sky. He went to the peace talk with General Quintus. Tiberius went with them. Is something wrong, my lord? Maxine's voice turned grave. Where? Instead of giving Maxine a direct answer, Michael asked where they went to hold the peace talks. If anything, the system couldn't be wrong, and if it said Heinberg had died, then it must be true. The question was how and who killed Heinberg. But after hearing Maxine, Michael could answer his own question. In the abandoned castle in the hissing wood, Michael ignored the rhythmic clicking sounds produced by the undead harvesting the arch-energy crystals with pickaxes. Where are you at? Michael asked Maxine as Gaia's eyes twitched. In the Stormville mountain, my lord, I'll be there in a minute. Get ready to move out. Michael cut the connection without saying anything further. Afterward, Michael quickly closed the windows as well as the curtains. The room lost all the light, and the darkness took hold of the room. With a simple wave of his hand, Michael snuffed out the light from the candles and chandeliers. When the room fell pitch black, Michael's eyes glistened like rubies. Stay here, Michael told Gaia a second before he vanished from the room. Visit. For the best no_vel_read_ng experience, Maxine dropped the pickaxe in her hand. Feeling uncomfortable because of the graveness in the Dark Lord's voice, Maxine flicked her wrist. In the next second, a skull mask and black robes materialized in her hand. She quickly placed the mask on her face and put on the dark robes above the dusty brown tunics. A cold breeze brushed past her back as Maxine felt a terrifying yet familiar presence. Maxine didn't need to turn around to tell that the man standing behind her was the Dark Lord. But unusually, the glistening blue crystals flickered, and the dark caves became darker. There was also a coldness in the air that sent shivers through her spine. She had never felt such a presence from the Dark Lord before. Coupled with the Dark Lord's questions about Heinberg and where he went, Maxine had a sickening feeling in her gut. No time for pleasantries. Lead me to Heinberg now, Michael said. Before Maxine could reply, Michael grabbed Maxine by her shoulder, casting the lightning dash. Michael only wanted Maxine to show him the way. He had no need for a backup, especially when one of his subordinates had died a few moments ago. This was the first time Michael lost a subordinate. Though he remained calm, Michael wanted to rip whoever killed Heinberg into shreds. It took so much effort to make each and every subordinate loyal to him. The last time Michael checked, Heinberg was on his way to becoming completely loyal to Michael. Every single subordinate was the cream of the crop, handpicked by Michael and Gaia. So losing one of them really stung Michael. Considering Michael pushed himself to the limit, his speed was to the point everything looked blurry. I shouldn't have taken Azazel away from the surveillance room. Michael blamed himself for making such an amateur mistake. Michael muttered under his breath. Apparently, the peace talk was just a facade to kill Heinberg and Tiberius. If General Quintus had Heinberg killed, he didn't want anyone to find Heinberg's body. Besides, he may have taken Tiberius too because no footsteps were leading to any of the broken windows or collapsed walls. Knowing Tiberius and his skills, it would be challenging for Quintus' men to take Tiberius alive without a fight. How did they ambush them? Michael saw no signs of footsteps in the blood puddle. So Michael looked upwards and flew towards the ceiling. To his surprise, Michael saw claw marks on the ceiling straight above the table. He looked deep to see if he could see more claw marks, but he only found 4. The pattern and distance between each claw mark told Michael that a person wearing sharp claws was sticking to the ceiling like a gecko. Michael looked down. When the time came, he dropped to the ground and probably cut Heinberg's throat. The sudden turn of events must have caught Tiberius off guard, Michael concluded. To learn how Tiberius went down, he needed more evidence, but luckily, his investigation came to an end when Azazel contacted him through the earpiece. Visit. For a better user experience, my lord. I found Lord Tiberius. He's been tortured by someone in a dark room as we speak. Thud. Tiberius fell to the ground and growled in pain. Upon seeing the cuts and wounds on Tiberius' body, Michael then threw a healing potion toward him. He could tell General Quintus took his sweet time getting Tiberius like a pig. So Michael wondered how Knuts would feel to be at Tiberius' place for a change. Take his body and follow me, Michael ordered Tiberius, who quickly emptied the healing potion into his mouth. The healing potion closed all the cuts in Tiberius' body. Tiberius immediately felt refreshed and revitalized. So he slowly stood up and walked to Heinberg's body. Michael was about to reach the door when he halted his steps. He then turned around to see Tiberius following him, carrying Heinberg's body in his arms. Visit. For a better user experience, was it General Quintus? Michael asked in his demonic voice, which sounded colder than usual. He tortured me, but he didn't kill Heinberg. It was someone else. At this point, Michael accessed the feed recorded by Tiberius' necklace spider and watched everything. The assassin who killed Tiberius possessed inhuman speed. He was either a highly trained assassin to even match Michael's skills or enhanced by some means. Otherwise, he couldn't have killed Heinberg and knocked out Tiberius in a blink of an eye. He was simply too fast. Wait for me, Michael said before willing the system to teleport Tiberius to the dark forest. Afterward, Michael opened the door to see where they were. If he had any luck, he might meet General Quintus. But it was doubtful since Michael sensed no one around him. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.